Have you ever found an old photograph that made your heart skip a beat? I did, and it changed everything. Hi there, I'm so glad you're here. Before we dive into my story, I have something special just for you. Introducing LipoSlend, the natural at-home liposuction method that supports healthy and steady weight loss while you sleep. Imagine waking up feeling refreshed and lighter, thanks to our unique formula that harnesses the power of nature. With ingredients like sulforaphane, cis quadrangularis, and acetyl L-carnitine, LipoSlend works to stop fat from growing and helps your body manage weight effectively. And that's not all. When you order today, you'll receive 2 free bonuses: Flawless Skin Secrets. Learn how to tighten loose skin and banish cellulite after your weight loss journey. And Primal Desserts. Indulge in delicious, fat-burning sweets that satisfy your cravings without the guilt. Plus, enjoy free shipping on every order. Ready to transform your nights and your body? Click the link in the description below to claim your discounted LipoSlend and start your journey to a healthier you today. Now let's begin my tale. One rainy afternoon, I was cleaning out my attic when I stumbled upon a dusty old box. Inside, I found a photograph of my family from long ago. It was a beautiful picture, filled with smiles and laughter. But as I looked closer, I noticed something strange. Each day, the faces of my loved ones began to fade away, like they were being erased from the world. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then I realized that people in my life were also forgetting them. My friends would mention my grandmother, and when I tried to share a story, they would look at me with confused faces. "Who?" they'd ask. It was like a dark cloud was swallowing my memories, and I could feel panic rising in my chest. I decided I had to figure this out. I went to the library, hoping to find answers hidden in old books. As I read, I learned about a curse that could erase memories and even people from existence. The thought chilled me to the bone. I felt like I was in a nightmare, and I was terrified of waking up to find my family completely gone. That night, I had a strange dream. I was in a dark forest, surrounded by shadows. I could hear whispers calling my name. "Help us," they said. I felt a chill run down my spine. I followed the voices deeper into the woods, my heart pounding. Suddenly I saw them, my family standing there, but they looked different. Their faces were blurry, like they were fading away in front of my eyes. "Please, don't let us disappear," my mother pleaded. I reached out to her, but as I did, she vanished into thin air. I woke up screaming, the sound echoing in my empty room. I knew I had to do something before it was too late. The next day, I returned to the attic, determined to find the photograph. When I held it in my hands, I felt a strange energy pulsing from it. I closed my eyes and wished with all my heart to bring my family back. Suddenly, I heard a loud crack. The photo split in half, and a dark mist began to swirl around me. I felt a cold breeze, and the shadows from my dream crept closer. They whispered my name again, but this time it sounded angry. "You shouldn't have disturbed us," they hissed. I was frozen in fear, unable to move as the darkness wrapped around me. In that moment, I remembered the stories I had read. I had to confront the curse and find out who was behind it. Gathering all my courage, I shouted into the darkness, "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" The shadows paused, and then a figure emerged from the mist. It was a woman, with hollow eyes and a sad smile. "I am the keeper of lost memories," she said softly. "I take what is forgotten and keep it safe, but you have disturbed the balance." I felt a chill as I realized that my family's fading memories were tied to this woman. "Please, I can't lose them. How can I help?" I begged. Her expression softened a little. "You must remember them. Speak their names, tell their stories. Only then can you break the curse." With that, the shadows began to swirl around me again, and I felt myself being pulled into the darkness. I closed my eyes and thought of my family, my grandmother's warm hugs, my father's laughter, my mother's kind words. I whispered their names over and over, feeling the warmth of my memories surround me. Suddenly, the darkness lifted, and I found myself back in my attic, the photograph glowing brightly in my hands. I could see my family's faces clearly again, their smiles full of life. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had done it. I had saved them. But then I noticed something unsettling. The photograph was still glowing, and the shadows were still lurking at the edges of my vision. I realized that while I had saved my family, the curse was not fully broken. I needed to keep remembering to keep their stories alive, or they would fade again. I took a deep breath and made a promise to myself. I would share their stories with everyone, so they would never be forgotten. I would tell my friends about my grandmother's amazing cooking, my father's adventures, and my mother's kindness. I would make sure that no one would ever forget them again. As I began to share, I noticed something strange. Every time I spoke their names, the shadows would retreat a little more. It was like my words were pushing them away, freeing my family from the curse. But I could still feel their presence, lurking in the corners of my mind, reminding me that I had to keep fighting. Days turned into weeks, and I continued to share my family's stories. I felt stronger, and the photograph seemed to pulse with energy. But deep down, I knew the shadows were still there, waiting for a moment of weakness. I had to stay vigilant. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a soft knock at my window. I peeked outside and saw a figure standing in the moonlight. My heart raced as I recognized the familiar face, my grandmother. But she looked different, her features blurred and fading. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I rushed to the window, but as I reached for her, she began to dissolve into the night. "No!" I screamed, but it was too late. She was gone, and the darkness crept back into my room, thicker than before. I knew I had to act fast. I grabbed the photograph and held it tightly, focusing on my grandmother's love. I could feel the warmth of her spirit, and I whispered her name over and over. The shadows began to retreat, but I could still hear them whispering, taunting me. "You can't save them all," they hissed. Determined, I decided to confront the shadows once and for all. I gathered my friends and family, sharing my story with them. I wanted them to understand the importance of remembering our loved ones, of keeping their stories alive. As we spoke together, I felt the energy in the room shift. The shadows began to swirl violently, angry at our defiance. Suddenly, the photograph burst into light, illuminating the room. I felt a surge of power as I shouted, "We will never forget them. Their stories will live on." The shadows screamed in rage, and I could feel their grip loosening. But just as I thought we were winning, a loud crash echoed through the room. The shadows surged forward, and I felt myself being pulled into the darkness again. "You can't escape us," they roared. I closed my eyes, remembering the warmth of my family's love. I focused on their faces, their laughter, and their stories. "I won't let you take them," I shouted into the void. The darkness shuddered, and I felt a light growing within me. I opened my eyes, and to my surprise, I saw my family standing beside me, their faces bright and clear. "We are here," they said in unison, their voices strong. Together, we faced the shadows, our love pushing them back. The room filled with light, and I could feel the warmth of our memories surrounding us. The shadows screamed in agony as they were banished from our lives, their whispers fading into silence. As the light faded, I found myself back in my attic, the photograph glowing softly in my hands. I knew the curse was broken, but I also understood that I had to keep remembering. I had to share my family's stories, not just for them, but for everyone who had ever loved and lost. From that day on, I made it my mission to keep their memories alive. I told their stories to anyone who would listen, sharing the laughter, the love, and the lessons they had taught me. And as I did, I felt their presence with me, guiding me and reminding me that love never truly fades. But even as I celebrated my victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were still out there, lurking just beyond the light. I knew I had to stay vigilant, to keep fighting for the memories of those I loved. Because in a world where memories can fade, it's the stories we share that keep them alive. And so, my journey continues, a reminder that while we may lose our loved ones, their stories live on in our hearts. I will always remember, and I will always share. because as long as we keep telling their tales, they will never truly fade away. But the darkness still whispers sometimes, reminding me that I must never forget. And so, I hold onto the photograph tightly, knowing that my fight is far from over. I must keep my family's memory alive, for if I don't, they may vanish from this world forever. As I look at the photograph, I can see the faces of my loved ones shining brightly. I know they are with me, and I will do everything in my power to keep their memories alive. The shadows may come and go, but my love for them will always remain strong. And so, I ask you, dear listener, to remember your loved ones too. Share their stories, keep their memories alive, and let the light of their love shine brightly in your heart. Together, we can fight against the shadows and ensure that no one is ever forgotten. As I sat there, my heart racing and my mind spinning with worry, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were not completely gone. Each night, after sharing my family's stories, I would hear soft whispers in the corners of my room, almost like echoes of the voices I had fought against. Sometimes it felt like the shadows were watching me, waiting for a moment of weakness. I could almost sense their cold gazes lingering in the darkness, prowling just out of sight, taunting me. One evening, when the moon hung low and full in the night sky, I decided to confront my fears. I gathered my courage and sat on my bed, clutching the photograph. The light from the moon spilled into my room, casting eerie shadows that made the walls seem to twist and contort. It was then that I heard it, a soft knock like a finger tapping against glass. My heart leaped into my throat. I turned slowly towards the window. The curtain fluttered slightly, and the chill in the air seemed to seep in through the glass. Hesitantly, I approached the window, peering outside. The tree branches swayed in the wind, casting strange shapes across the lawn, but there was no one there. Just when I thought it was nothing, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing in the distance, partially hidden behind the trees. My heart began to pound in my chest as I squinted to see better, but before I could focus, it vanished into the shadows. Later that night, as I was trying to sleep, I kept hearing whispers, a faint echoing, almost rhythmic. It sounded like my grandmother's voice, mixed with the other fading voices I was determined to protect. The words were unclear, but I felt their urgency, like they were trying to tell me something important. I sat up in bed, the room cloaked in darkness except for a sliver of moonlight streaming through the cracks in the curtains. Suddenly, my eyes caught movement by the photograph. To my horror, I saw the image begin to shimmer, the faces swirling as though they were struggling to break free from their frozen smiles. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was dreaming, but the sight only grew more disturbing as the faces looked directly at me, their expressions pleading for help. I reached for the photograph, but when I touched it, an icy shock coursed through my fingers. From nowhere, a gust of wind rushed through my room. Papers flew from my desk, and the curtains whipped violently as if a storm had erupted inside my home. The shadows that had lingered seemed to grow in intensity, thickening like smoke, coiling around my legs. Struggling to breathe, I shouted into the chaos, "Get away from me!" But as my voice echoed in the room, I felt a presence behind me, something cold and clammy brushing against my skin. I whipped around, but there was nothing there, just the oppressive darkness pressing in on me. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of desperate voices urging me to remember. In my panic, I grabbed the photograph tightly, trying to focus on my family's love. And then, in a moment of clarity, I realized I hadn't been sharing enough stories. Perhaps the curse worked not just on me, but on those in the photograph, living lives full of love that still needed to be honored. Gathering every ounce of strength, I began to speak aloud about my family. Each story, each cherished memory tumbling from my lips. I shared about my grandmother's laughter, how she would bake cookies that filled the house with warmth and sweetness. I told tales of my father's whimsical adventures in the woods, fighting imaginary dragons and exploring hidden treasures. As I spoke, I felt a strange shift in the air. The darkness seemed to shudder, the shadows hesitating as if caught between two worlds. But then the whispers turned into shrieks, angry and desperate. The thrill of fear coursed through me, and the air grew thick with an unholy presence. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from the hallway, as if something had collided violently against the wall. My heart leaped again. I wasn't alone. I hesitated, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. Yet I couldn't abandon my family stories. I couldn't give strength to the shadows. I breathed deeply, pushing myself to continue, even as terror gripped my throat. And then I heard it. Soft footsteps, padding softly down the darkened hallway, growing closer with every heartbeat. I could hardly breathe as I listened intently, the whispers now sharper, sounding like a warning. They won't remember if you don't stop. They echoed, menacing and chilling. Finally, I summoned what courage I had left and stepped into the hallway. The shadows danced around me, and I braced myself for whatever was lurking in the dark. My heart raced as the footsteps stopped, and a cold breeze rushed past me, bringing with it a sense of dread. The moonlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the hallway just enough for me to see the edges of the darkness swirling at my feet. In a moment that felt both swift and heavy, I caught sight of a figure standing at the end of the hallway, pale and transparent, much like the faces in the photograph. It was my grandmother, but something added to the dread. She looked lost and sad, her eyes wide and pleading. "Help us," she whispered, her voice fragile as a leaf caught in the wind. I felt tears sting my eyes as I reached for her, desperate to pull her back to me. But as I stepped forward, the shadows erupted into chaos, swirling and shrieking, making it almost impossible to think. "She is ours," they hissed, their tones sharp and bitter. "You cannot save her. You will forget, just like all the others." I felt a surge of fear and anger wash over me. "No!" I yelled, trying to drown out their noise. "You can't take her. I won't let you." As I shouted, the room around me seemed to fracture, and the shadows pulsated with fury. The lights flickered, and for a moment, I saw the faces of my family coming into focus, their forms flickering in and out of existence like a faulty image on a screen. "We're fading," they cried in unison, their voices rising above the cacophony of the shadows. "Remember us?" I clutched the photograph to my chest, feeling its warmth radiate against my heart. It was a lifeline, a tether to their memories and stories. Summoning everything I had learned, every tale, every laughter and tear, I shouted into the darkness, "I will remember. I will fight for you." With those words, an explosion of light burst forth from the photograph, enveloping me in warmth and brilliance. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in terror, and I felt my family's love surround me as their presence solidified into something tangible. But as I prepared to embrace their light, a deeper darkness slithered along the edges of the room, feeding off the fear the shadows left behind. As the echoes of my family's laughter grew closer and engulfed me, I felt the cold tendrils of the new darkness wrapping around my ankles, pulling me down. Chills crept through my body as I fought against it, but the grip only tightened. "I won't forget you," I screamed, tears streaming down my face as I struggled to stay grounded. I could see my grandmother reaching for me, her expression now one of fierce determination. "You are stronger than the darkness," she urged. I knew in that moment that if I didn't fight back with everything I had, the darkness would consume me too. The photograph pulsed again, and the light flickered, pushing the new shadows back momentarily. But I knew it would not last unless I could draw the light back. The whispers became at once soothing and menacing, pulling me toward a corner of the room where the shadows moved in erratic patterns. It felt as if they were alive, hungry for the memories I had fought so hard to protect. I realized that to end this, I had to face my deepest fears, confront the darkness that lay in my mind. So, I focused, my thoughts whirling back to my family, to all the moments of happiness and love we shared. To do this, I had to let go of my fear and embrace the memories fully. "I remember," I shouted again, my voice rising above the din. "I remember all of you." As I spoke, the photograph glowed brighter, pulling me back, exposing the truth hidden beneath the shadows. I can't forget what we had, I pleaded as the darkness writhed in response to my words. You cannot take them away from me. But the shadows were relentless, closing in. I felt panic creep over me as I remembered the stories I hadn't yet told, those hidden within my heart, waiting to be freed. Grandma, Dad, Mom, I will remember all of you, I yelled, the tears falling freely now. Join me, please. At that moment, as desperation clawed at my insides, my family's voices rose with mine, filling the room as they fought the shadows alongside me. The light from the photograph became blinding, illuminating every crevice filled with darkness. I could sense it. The fight was about to climax, and I had to be part of it fully, wholly, fearlessly. In that swirl of light and shadow, my family stood together, strong and united. Together, we are more powerful, we shouted, and the air thickened with our collective love and memories, unfurling like a beautiful tapestry against the angry darkness. But I still didn't know if this would truly be enough. I needed to learn how to permanently close this chapter to ensure the shadows would never return. And I had to dig even deeper to remember our legacies. The shadows lashed out violently, twisting and screaming in anguish, but at the same time, they fused into a singular shape, a dark figure that bore semblance to a human form. It was unsettling, almost familiar, but not quite right. You think you can banish me? It rasped, its voice echoing with menace. I took a deep breath, realizing even the memories still flickered like an untamed flame. I must try, I bellowed. With every ounce of what I had, I embraced the memories of joy, laughter, and happiness among us. I thought of every silly moment, the way we danced in the kitchen, the Christmas mornings filled with joy, the afternoons spent laughing on the porch. The dark figure twisted, and I could see the outlines of faces. My family mixed in a horrific way with shadows. I had to act. Breaking through the noise of predatory whispers threatened to pull me under. I called on the essence of those moments. You cannot take them, I shouted, gripping the photograph. Resolute, I stood my ground as an explosion of energy surged from me, projecting my memories into the heart of the shadow. Light burst forth, wrestling against the growing dark. I could feel my family's spirits surrounding me, charging up the light, ready to fight alongside my resolve. The dark figure recoiled, howling as beams of light struck it, illuminating its twisted form. Each hit revealed broken pieces of memories I had held on to tighter than the shadows had. I remember all of you, ran through my mind like a mantra. But just as I thought we were winning, the air filled with icy fingers. The shadows multiplied, forming haunting silhouettes of those I had loved. They floated menacingly, mockingly, their mouths moving, but silent screams wrenched through the air, tearing at my heart. No! I shouted, recoiling as the pain of their loss washed over me. They were fading, just as they had begun to be lost to time. Remember what we shared? I screamed into the darkness, focusing with everything I had. The unyielding thread of being lost gripped me like a vice, suffocating in its intensity. But then, the realization struck me. Memories are not just happy moments. They include the times filled with sorrow, loss, and struggle. I will remember the pain too, I cried out. I will cherish it. As soon as I admitted the truth of our struggles, I felt the shadows pull away momentarily, shocked at the power of my acceptance. My heartbeat steadied. I felt loved ones with me in that sacred space, pouring their energy into my words. Our stories are our strength, I proclaimed. I drew the shadows in, welcoming their presence, balancing light and dark, joy and sorrow. In that moment of clarity, I realized I would not just remember the light. I would embrace everything they were, shadows included. Together, as we are, beautifully flawed, I said, feeling the depths of understanding wash over me. The darkness shuddered, breaking apart at the seams, the cries morphing into low whimpers. I could feel the warmth spiraling within me, eclipsing the darkness around me. I had unlocked the heart of the struggle, drawing fiercely the vastness of our experiences, the battles we'd fought together, as well as those still to come. I will remember every part of you, so our love will live on forever. The room crackled with energy as my words hung in the air. The shadows hesitated, their twisted forms shifting uneasily, as if my declaration had struck a nerve. I felt a rush of warmth enveloping me, but the chill of uncertainty prickled at the back of my neck, warning me not to let my guard down just yet. As the darkness wavered, I could see faces flicker in and out among the shadows. My loved ones caught between realms, looking both sorrowful and hopeful. I reached out, desperate to grasp their ethereal hands, but they dissolved like mist whenever I tried. Instead, they seemed to cry out silently, urging me to remember more. Then, the atmosphere turned oppressive. I felt a heavy weight settle around me like a thick fog, and the whispers morphed into a sinister chant. "You can't bind us," they taunted, the voices intertwining with an unsettling laughter that reverberated through the room. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, sharp and grating, sending shivers racing down my spine. I took a cautious step backward, my heart pounding uneasily in my chest. With every ounce of bravery, I gripped the photograph tighter, calling upon my family's strength to settle the fear swirling within me. "I will not let you take the stories," I yelled, clenching my teeth, desperate to hold on to my memories, my voice echoing into the encroaching shadows. Suddenly, a cold breath swept over me, freezing my skin, and I felt a presence move past my shoulder. It was as if someone was standing right behind me, their face so close I could feel their freezing breath against my ear. Panic surged through me, and I twisted around to confront whatever was hiding, but there was nothing. Just empty, consuming darkness that seemed to mock my terror. The temperature dropped further, and the faint scent of something rotten filled the air, making my stomach churn. "You're losing your grip," the voice hissed, slithering like a serpent coaxing me to despair. "They will forget you. You will forget them." I swallowed hard, trying to drown out the malevolence cloaking the room. But the shadows flickered with life, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes. I could see them now, pairs of eyes glowing ominously, the mouths of the figures stretching into wide, mocking grins. They encircled me, their whispers growing louder, drowning out my thoughts. Struggling to breathe, I clenched my fists, fighting against the nausea creeping into my throat. "No!" I screamed, refusing to waver. "You're wrong. As long as I fight, they'll always be with me." The shadows paused, momentarily taken aback by my defiance. But the figures resumed their slow dance, wailing louder, a cacophony of my family's names twisted into a haunting lullaby. The chants swirled around me like a tempest, threatening to drag me under. I could feel the very essence of my heart starting to unravel, pieces of me threatening to fade along with the memories. Then something remarkable happened. In the center of the storm, I began to see flickers of light, tiny specks glimmering like stars in a night sky. They darted around me, weaving through the shadows, illuminating fragments of my past. The laughter of my siblings, the warmth of my parents' embraces, the smell of my grandmother's cookies baking in the kitchen. I could almost hear their voices intertwining, creating a symphony of love and connection amidst the chaos. "Hold on to them," I urged myself, fighting against the dark undertow, pulling me deeper into despair. "I can't let them take me. I won't forget." I stepped forward, feeling each memory strengthen my resolve. I remember your laughter, your stories, the lessons you taught me." The shadows shrieked and recoiled, and I could sense the darkness faltering. But they were not finished yet. Drawing closer, I could see twisted faces materializing, their features warped with rage. The shadows lunged toward the points of light, attempting to snuff them out as they drew near. "These whispers will consume you," they howled, their voices echoing menacingly like a storm raging outside. Suddenly, I was enveloped in a blinding light, as though a door to a brighter realm had burst open. It surrounded me, its warmth washing over my chill-ridden heart. I could feel my family's presence empowering me, amplifying my voice beyond comprehension. Your darkness cannot extinguish our love, I declared, and with that, I plunged forward, facing the howling shadows head-on. As I did, I noticed something horrifying. The shadows began to morph, twisting into the shapes of those I had loved and lost, my grandparents, my friends, even pets. Their faces were contorted in pain, eyes pleading for rescue, but at the same time, wrapped in the cold wafts of darkness. "Remember us," they whispered, their voices echoing softly. "Do not let this barren void erase us." Instinctively, I stepped back, terror gripping my heart as the shadows lunged towards me, ready to swallow me whole. But deep within, I felt a surge of defiance. "No!" I shouted, and with all my strength, I focused on the memories, the love that had filled my life. Suddenly, a powerful force surged through me as I infused every good moment with vibrant energy, determined to illuminate the shadows. The photograph vibrated in my hand, glowing brighter with every cherished story I recounted. The shadows writhed, struggling to absorb the brilliant light that pierced through their darkness. I fought to stay grounded as the edges of reality blurred, my loved ones swirling around me like a tempest, powerful, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. "I'll remember," I screamed, my voice echoing in defiance. "You can't take my memories. You can't take my family." But as I stood strong, something shifted in the air. I could feel the very fabric of the darkness thickening, and it pulled me into a whirlpool of trembling shadows. It was sobering, as if a storm had unexpectedly broken over my head. The temperature plummeted, and I felt raw terror clawing at my heart as spectral arms reached for me from every corner. The chilling whispers returned, now sounding like the voices of my family turned against me. "You were weak. You don't remember well enough," they echoed, the familiar tones now twisted and mocking. It was maddening. How could they, after everything? I felt my resolve begin to waver, just as the shadows shrieked louder, uniting into a singular, monstrous voice. "You're ours to command. Give in." No matter how much pain churned in my heart, I refused to yield. I called upon every memory, holding onto them tightly, as if they were the last petals on a dying flower. The flickers of light began to coalesce around me like small embers igniting a fire. "I will remember," I roared, summoning every ounce of love, every laugh, every tear until they worked in harmony, creating a brilliant glow that pushed the shadows back. Suddenly, a piercing howl shattered the night, a sound so unsettling it shook the very foundation beneath me. My family's faces shifted to sorrowful masks, urging me to push forward, resonating like a harmonious echo of love and loss. A bittersweet reminder that to remember truly is to accept both joy and grief. The shadows bared down on me, shrieking with rage as my heart raced faster. I could feel the light growing, but not enough. The shadows were absorbing every ounce of fear. My breath hitched as I realized what I might have to do. To truly banish them, I must confront my own darkness, the part of me that feared losing them in the first place. Closing my eyes, I focused on the pain, the sorrow of that loss. My body trembled uncontrollably as tears streamed down my face. I remembered the day we laid my grandmother to rest, the hollow ache in my chest when I lost touch with my childhood friends. Those weren't just losses. They were chapters in my story filled with laughter and love that deserved to be honored. "I embrace it," I shouted, feeling stronger than I ever had before. "I accept the hurt. I honor it with love." As I leaned into the pain, I felt the shadows recoil, their forms wavering in hesitation. "I will not forget you. Your lessons are a part of me. You taught me to love wildly." The shadows twisted violently, now in full retreat. The light surged around me, brighter than ever, forcing the specters to shriek and cower. With one last act of defiance, I raised the glowing photograph high, illuminating everything with radiant warmth, feeling the strength of my family's love wrap around me like a protective cocoon. In that very instant, a thunderous roar echoed through the room. The shadows screamed, contorting into grotesque shapes, clawing at the air like they were being torn apart by an unseen force. I felt the tidal wave of energy cascade through me, pulsing with life as I completely embraced the duality of love and loss. With a final shout, I let the energy explode outward, engulfing the room in blinding brilliance. The darkness shrieked in unison, echoing into nothingness as it crumbled away, the figures of my loved ones finally emerging from the shadows, radiating warmth and light. I felt their love enveloping me, fiercely protective and all-consuming. As I stood in the aftermath, breathless and trembling, the room felt different. The oppressive weight was lifted, but a lingering chill ran through the air like an aftershock. I could still sense lingering shadows at the edges of my vision, whispering in lost tones. They weren't gone for good. In that moment, I understood that, although I had triumphed, it would be a struggle I would have to fight daily. Overwhelmed with both relief and trepidation, I surveyed the room once more. The photograph, still glowing gently in my hands, seemed to pulse with life. My family, surrounded by warmth, watched me with gentle smiles. "Remember us, always," they whispered in unison, their voices intertwining beautifully in the silence. I nodded fervently, pledging in my heart that I would safeguard their memories. But deep down, an unsettling knot twisted in my stomach. I could feel the shadows still lurking, waiting for me to falter, for a moment of weakness. I had glimpsed their power, tasted their malice, and knew this wasn't a fight that would end easily. Resting my head against the photograph, I closed my eyes, the warmth enveloping me like a cocoon. With every heartbeat, I became more convinced that this was just the beginning of a much darker journey. The struggle against the shadows would continue, and the battle to keep my family's memories alive would require constant vigilance. Each day would be a test, a fight to hold on to every story, every laugh, and every tear that made us who we were. As I stood there, heart racing and determination surging through my veins, I realized that I'd need to confront this darkness again, and soon. Each night, I resolved I would return to this photo, this sacred reminder of love and despair, and strengthen the connection between my world and theirs. I could almost hear my grandmother's voice in my heart, urging me on. "I will remember," I vowed quietly to myself, staring resolutely into the shadows even as they continued to linger, ever watchful and ever hungry. My fight was only just beginning. Days passed slowly, and each night I found myself returning to the threshold where shadows whispered. I would sit in the corner of my room, clutching the glowing photograph like a lifeline, hoping it would keep the darkness at bay. But with each passing moment, I could feel the shadows lurking just out of sight, their presence heavy and oppressive. It was like they enjoyed taunting me, reminding me of the pain buried deep beneath the surface. I began to notice strange things happening. Objects would shift when I was not looking, and I could hear soft whispers in the corners of my house. It was unnerving. One night, as I prepared to sleep, I heard my name floating through the still air, a voice I thought I recognized, yet it was twisted in a way that sent chills crawling up my spine. "Remember us? Remember us?" they echoed. I opened my eyes wide, staring into the darkness that surrounded me. Was I imagining it? The air grew thick with tension, heavy with unspoken fears and anguish. I turned on all the lights, hoping to drown out the whispers, but their tones still penetrated the walls. The shadows seemed to pulse, growing restless, desperate to communicate something lost. Then I found myself alone one night, lost in an unsettling silence. I had pushed away distractions, focusing solely on my memories, searching for comfort in familiar stories. As I closed my eyes, the world shifted again. A cold wind whirled through the room, extinguishing the lights one by one. An icy dread enveloped me as the whispers grew louder, wrapped around me like dark tendrils, ready to pull me into their depths. "Let us in," floated through the air, a soft plea that twisted into a command. I felt compelled to listen, heart racing. I squeezed the photograph tighter, willing its warmth to protect me. But the more I held onto it, the more shadows amassed, swirling in chaotic circles. It was mesmerizing and terrifying all at once. The chill was unbearable, making my skin prickle and my breath quicken. In the dim light, filtered through the window, I caught sight of movement in the corner. A figure, just outside my view, flickered like a candle in a gust, restless and hungry. I blinked rapidly, trying to make it out, but it darted back into the darkness, a maddening game of cat and mouse. "Join us," it whispered, the voice echoing in my mind, sending shivers cascading down my spine. Rattled, I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage I had left. "No!" I shouted, and for a moment, the darkness hesitated, a brief lull in the ominous choir that surrounded me. "I won't give in," but as if sensing my defiance, the shadows coalesced. They merged into one vast, menacing mass, a twisting, undulating shape that somehow resembled a face, its eyes gleaming with malice. I could see ice-cold fury painted across its features, its mouth opening in a silent scream that filled me with dread. My chest constricted as I felt something rush past me, a cold wind that reeked of decay and misery. The photo flickered weakly in my grip. It felt lighter, as if the shadows were siphoning its energy. I stumbled back, panic clawing at my throat as I focused on the flickering light. I needed to remember more, to hold on tighter before everything was consumed. Then, I heard it, a faint sob, a voice laced with loss piercing through the shadows. Help us," it pleaded. It sounded like my mother. My heart ached, and instinctively, I turned to face the swirling void, desperation filling my voice. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, trembling yet bold. The figure loomed closer, its eyes narrowing, shimmering with a hungry sort of glee. "You remain unworthy, and we are here to remind you," it hissed, words dripping with disdain. "We are the echoes of your dreams, trapped among your fears." I felt a shudder slide down my spine, the shadows seeming to grow taller, pulling from the depths of my mind. "In your memories lies our freedom." Its form twisted dark, cloud-like fingers extending toward me, inviting me to delve deeper into the passageways of my mind where pain lingered unaddressed. I hesitated, not wanting to unlock the doors of buried grief. Yet beneath my fear, I felt a heavy weight of sorrow that needed to be acknowledged, a truth I could no longer ignore. That night, I took a step I hadn't intended. The shadows began to swirl again, the figure urging me to remember those lost moments, the love that had slipped through my fingers. I had to confront the darkest places within my heart, the moments I had buried so deeply I thought I might forget them altogether. "Open your heart, and we will show you." The shadow spoke with a voice that dripped like honey, yet stung like acid. I felt drawn to the statement, slumping against the wall, feeling overwhelmed yet strangely safe. With a shaky breath, I closed my eyes and focused. Images flared to life, vivid and raw. I saw myself as a child, clutching a tattered teddy bear, crying as my mother walked out the door for the last time. I remembered the loneliness that came after her absence, the echo of silence stretching in the empty house. The bitterness of grief settled in my stomach, but how I fought against it. I had been so afraid to recall the anguish, but now it surged through me like an unchained tide. "Yes, feel it, remember it all," the shadows cackled, feeding off my pain, their whispered encouragement ringing faintly as they twisted around me. Images morphed again, flashing before my eyes, dragging me under. I saw my grandmother's frail hands trembling as she whispered her last goodbyes, the dim light of her hospital room swirling with the scent of stale medicine. Her soft, warm hugs now a haunting reminder of love that had slipped away. I could feel their essence with me, enveloped in the shadows pouring forth from this terrible place. They longed for acknowledgement, Pain had woven its way through our stories, made us who we were. As the darkness howled around me, I caught glimpses of their faces, now twisted with anguish. Remember, they chorused, their voices echoing, laced with warnings of a past yet to haunt my future. With a force I never knew I possessed, I shouted back into the void, I remember your lessons. The power surged, the shadows recoiling momentarily, but the dark figure seemed to find renewed strength in my turmoil. You are but a flicker, it hissed, its voice powerful like a thunderclap. When you embrace sorrow, you also embrace us. As I opened my eyes again, I felt panic grip my chest like a vice. The shadows began to sway and engulf me, thick and cloying, mingling with the bitter taste of tears cascading down my cheeks. They converged around me, wrapping me in a dark cocoon, blurring the lines between memory and reality. Each heartbeat felt like an eternity as I fought to breathe amid the overwhelming despair. Suddenly, I heard an intense crack, like a branch breaking underfoot. A chill ran through the air, and the room trembled. The photograph slipped from my fingers, crashing to the floor, the glass shattering, scattering shards across my feet. Release us, the shadows roared, the room spiraling into chaotic laughter mingled with sorrow. It was bedlam, and my heart raced at the feeling of impending dread. The darkness surged closer, slick tendrils brushing against my skin, attempting to break through my defenses. It's time for you to join us, they taunted, laughter echoing wildly as figures materialized, their intent twisted and hungry. I felt their grasp pulling at my soul, threatening to snuff out my light once and for all. Desperate and terrified, I remembered the warmth of my family, the love we shared, the laughter, even the tears. I could not let go. My memories are mine, I bellowed, channeling every ounce of strength to push back against the tide of shadows. I had to fight harder than ever. I would not fall into their grasp. And then I felt it, a surge of energy erupting from within me, pushing against the encroaching darkness. The air thickened, trembling with a force I couldn't understand. I shouted once more, "You are not stronger than my love." With that, the shadows recoiled, their swirling forms freezing in sudden fear. Cracks of light pierced through the edges of the darkness, illuminating the room in a fading glow, pushing against the malevolence that sought to consume me. "We are eternal," they shrieked, twisting and bearing down, but their intensity began to falter as I drew strength from my memories. In that moment, I became one with the echoes of my family's love. Their laughter became a shield, their stories a reminder that even in darkness, there could be light. As I stood resolute, my heart pounding fiercely, I pressed forward, summoning the memories that had once brought me joy. "You will not take them," I cried out, embodying their strength. As my voice rose, the shadows flared, struggling against the light I projected, the remnants of love that would never fade. I felt the pulse of their essence infused in me, lifting me above the encroaching darkness, and with one mighty breath, I exploded into a brilliant flash of warmth. The shadows writhed and twisted, their laughter turning into desperate howls of fury as the light engulfed them. They struggled beneath the brilliance, their figures distorting grotesquely. I could sense them dissipating, torn asunder by the light that overwhelmed their darkness. "You cannot extinguish our memory," I shouted into the storm, my words painting them with every beautiful recollection of my family. The shadows twisted and screamed, contorting into themselves, trying to claw back into the dark corners of my heart. In a blinding flash, I felt a weight lift, a rush of air as freedom flooded through my veins. The darkness shattered, disappearing into nothingness like sand slipping through my fingers. Staggering in the aftermath, I gasped for breath. The room was still, eerily quiet, but a comfortable warmth surrounded me, a reassuring presence marking the defeat of the shadows, if only for now. I looked around, my heartbeat slowing, still grasping the remnants of the radiant energy. I had faced them, And though the journey had only begun, I knew deep down that I would never be alone in this fight. I would remember not just the happy times, but the painful ones too, the lessons learned in loss and love. I understood now that shadows might linger, but as long as I held on to my memories, their power diminished. A part of me would always be vigilant, waiting for their resurgence in the depths of night. But I would not falter. I would carry my loved ones with me, letting their stories live on, protecting the light in my heart against darkness that threatened to rise. It wouldn't be easy, but as long as I remembered, as long as I believed, I would always find my way back to the light. Resolute, I took a deep breath, knowing I had harnessed something profound and beautiful, thus marking the end of that particular battle. But it was still on the horizon, lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness, ready to draw me back into its haunting embrace. My journey wasn't over. Each night would hold its own trials, but I was ready, and I would keep fighting, no matter what. My journey wasn't over. As the quiet settled around me, the weight of what I had faced lingered like a thick fog. I thought I had banished the shadows, but somewhere deep inside, unease stirred. Each night, darkness drew near with its familiar embrace, curling about the edges of my thoughts. I tried to push it away, to fill my evenings with light and laughter, but still, something felt off. I noticed it first in small ways. My reflection in the mirror became a stranger, flickering like a faulty bulb, haunted eyes staring back at me as if warning of something lurking behind the glass. I would see movement in the corners of my vision, fleeting figures slipping away before I could fully register them. Sometimes, I could swear I heard soft footsteps echoing in the hallway, an unsettling rhythm that set my nerves on edge. One night, the air grew still, more so than usual. I was sitting in the living room, the TV casting a muted glow as I tried to distract myself from my apprehensions. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of laughter. At first, it was faint and playful, but gradually it gained volume. It felt so familiar, a sound I had longed to hear. Is it real? I whispered to myself, heart pounding in time with the laughter that echoed in my ears. I stood up slowly, peering into the darkened corners of the room. The laughter faded, replaced by a disconcerting silence that made my skin crawl. A shiver ran down my spine as I realized what I might be doing, inviting the shadows back. Struggling to maintain my courage, I took a shaky breath and called out, "Who's there?" For a moment, silence enveloped me. I felt the temperature drop, cold air wrapping around me like a vice. Panic clawed at my throat, tightening with every heartbeat. Suddenly, the laughter erupted again, a chorus of voices mingling together behind me. I whipped around, but nothing was there. The room felt empty, yet it throbbed with a sense of foreboding. Then I noticed something strange. The ambient air shifted, like a weight pulling towards the far corner of the room, dark and swirling. I took a step back, dread pooling in my stomach. The shadows began to twist, stretching and morphing until they coalesced into forms that danced just beyond my sight, lingering in the periphery of my vision. Amidst the growing darkness, I heard whispers rising, soft, haunting murmurs that seeped into my thoughts. "Help us," they called, a chilling echo that sent deep shudders through my body. "Leave me alone," I shouted, the defiance trembling in my voice. I wanted to be strong, to reclaim my space and memories, but they pressed closer, shadows swirling like a storm growing furious. I could almost make out shapes within the darkness, visages twisting into anguished expressions, their eyes glinting with sorrowful longing. My heart raced as I stumbled back, my mind racing with memories I thought long forgotten. Shadows of guilt, regret, and loneliness resurfaced, clawing at the edges of my sanity. The darker memories suddenly rushed in, a flood urging me to feel the pain I had pushed aside. "You brought us here," they whispered, taunting me with every heartbeat. Thinking I would be free if I accepted the warmth of those memories, I dropped to my knees, surrendering to the overwhelming surge of emotion pouring through me. I remember I cried, choking on the weight of what I had lost. But the shadows didn't recede. Instead, they thickened, choking the light around me. "Make them stay," a voice hissed, low and sinister. My eyes darted about wide and searching. The darkness seemed to pulse, eager to close in, hungrily absorbing the light that still held a flicker of my courage. I had stepped beyond the threshold. I could feel my will beginning to fracture under the weight of both the unbearable memories and the shadow's pull. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the last flicker of the television screen. Darkness swallowed me whole, leaving only the unsettling whispers to fill the space where light once resided. "Join us," they begged, sweet and seductive, echoing through my very bones. "Don't fight it. Embrace us." It was a chilling invitation that sent fresh waves of ice coursing through me. "Never," I gasped, trembling at the realization that I was losing my grip on reality. "You're not real. You cannot have me," I screamed into the void, not knowing if my words could pierce through the dark. I felt the pressure around me intensify. The shadows drew closer, dark tendrils reaching out like icy fingers experimenting with my resolve. My breath quickened, panic rising with every heartbeat. But deep within, a flicker of light remained, the memories of laughter and love pushing back against the oppressive gloom. Then, abruptly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, a warm, comforting presence breaking through the icy grip of shadows. I spun around, and there was my grandmother, radiant yet shrouded in an almost ethereal glow, her smile both familiar and more powerful than before. "It's not your time, my dear," she said softly, her voice cutting through the veil of unrest. In that moment, my heart was torn in two. I sensed her warmth, the protection of her essence sparkling, just out of reach. "Do not fear them," she continued, calm and steady. "Embrace your memories. Let them guide you, not destroy you." Even as shadows crept closer, her presence shone like a beacon, an anchor against the chaotic tide threatening to swallow me whole. I turned back to the darkness and took a step toward it, clenching my fists. "I will not be consumed," I shouted, the power of my grandmother's love invigorating me as I held onto my memories. "Yes," she encouraged, a soft smile cutting through the chaos. "Your strength lies within. Remember the love, not the loss." As her words echoed in my mind, the shadows splintered, shrieking as they pulled back, the darkness weakening against the glow of my memories. I could still hear their whispers, desperate now, filled with rage, but they were fading, unraveling in the brilliance radiating from the love I held so tightly. With a final effort, I summoned every cherished moment to the forefront of my mind. Each laugh, each tear, each light shared among us. The shadows howled, became frantic, thrashing against my light, but I pushed harder, focusing on my grandmother's radiant countenance, which held me steady in this storm. "You have no power over me anymore," I declared, voice resonating with the strength of all I had loved. The shadows cracked, the air shimmering as their forms dissolved back into nothingness, the laughter fading until only silence reigned. Breathless, I fell to my knees, my grandmother's presence lingering, a warm, comforting shroud that wrapped around me. "You must be vigilant," she whispered, her words echoing in the vast silence. "Shadows will always linger, waiting for moments of doubt. But you possess the light. Remember that." As she faded, warmth pulsed through my body, filling every crevice of my heart. I understood then. The shadows might always return, but I could never forget. The memories of love, laughter, and resilience would forever shield me, staving off the darkness that lurked in the corners. Yet, even as clarity returned, unease began to prick at my mind. The thick shadows had receded, replaced by an unsettling quiet, but I could feel something lurking beneath the surface, waiting for me to falter again. The whispers might have quieted, but I knew they'd find a way back, their hunger always insatiable. The battle was only won for now. I felt a strange realization wash over me. This fight against darkness didn't end with a victory. It was unending, a constant struggle to keep my memories alive and intact. For in each moment of weakness, I sensed their ever-watchful presence, ready to strike when I was unprepared. I rose with renewed determination, steeling myself against the encroaching winter chill that filled the air. I will be ready, I swore quietly. Let them come. I will remember. With that, I prepared for whatever lay ahead, knowing full well the shadows would return. But so would my strength, a resolve to keep the light alive against the eternal night. Let them come. I will remember. Days turned into weeks, but the uneasy feeling never truly left. Each night, I prepared for their return, staving off the lingering shadows with light, laughter, and memories. I surrounded myself with the reminders of love. Old photographs hung on the walls, candlelit dinners for one becoming routines that felt like rituals. I thought I had built a fortress against the darkness, but I could never shake that feeling. The shadows were always lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for a moment of vulnerability. One particularly cold night, a storm rumbled outside, rolling thunder echoing through the stillness of my home. As I settled onto the couch with a blanket wrapped tightly around me, I thought I could weather it all. The wind howled, whistling through the cracks of the old windows. And for a moment, I forgot the creeping sensation of fear that always felt just a heartbeat away. But then it happened. The lights flickered, and for a second, everything went black. My heart raced, pounding in my chest as I sat there in complete darkness. I reached for my phone, the faint glow illuminating the room in shaky light. Just as I found the screen, the lights returned, illuminating my living room once more. Yet something was different. A chill lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. I glanced around, feeling an uneasy knot forming in my stomach. In the reflection of the window, I swore I saw a shadow darting behind me just as I turned. Something that shouldn't be there. Something familiar yet out of place. My pulse quickened as I stood up, scanning the room with the sharp glow of my phone in hand, the darkness almost covering me like a fog. Is anyone there? I called out, my voice unsteady, edges trembling with fear. There was no answer, only the rustling of leaves outside mixed with the wind's eerie lullaby. I took a deep breath, determined to push through the tightening fear coiling around my heart. I took a step toward the hallway, each footfall echoing ominously against the silence. The air felt electric, almost charged with an anticipation that sent shivers down my spine. You are merely shadows, I whispered to myself, trying to convince my racing mind. Just figments of my imagination. But as I reached the hallway, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. A child's drawing lay discarded on the floor, a crayon-rendered sun next to a figure with wide eyes, taller than the child it was meant to depict. It hadn't been there before. My stomach dropped as I bent down to examine it closer. As I picked it up, memories rippled through me. I remembered creating art like this when I was younger, a time when darkness hadn't yet seeped into my consciousness. Help us? The whisper slipped between my ears, a familiar yet alien sentiment that chilled me to the bone. I froze, heart pounding uncontrollably. The voice was soft, almost childlike, and I could feel it wrapping around me, pulling me into a memory I couldn't control. Stay away, I shouted, hurling the drawing across the room. It fluttered in the air, caught by an unseen breeze before settling into the shadows. That's when I heard it, a faint giggle echoing from the depths of the darkened hallway. The sound was so playful, yet so chilling, a sharp contrast that threw my heart into chaos. I backed away, stumbling slightly as I turned toward the living room, my breathing becoming shallow as the laughter morphed into something darker. The playfulness shifted into a cacophony of shrieks, a chorus of voices that twisted and churned, each rising in pitch as they closed in, surrounding me in a haze of dread. Help us, they echoed, their voices blending together until they were one haunting melody, a song that wrapped around my mind, squeezing tighter and tighter. I could feel the shadows crawling closer, tendrils extending from the corners of the hallway, reaching for me. I needed to find a way out, to escape the tightening grip of darkness that closed in. Just as I turned back toward the lights flickered again, dimming briefly before all at once plunging me into absolute dark again. My heart raced as I felt the familiar presence swirling in the air, crawling across my skin. Fingers of ice traced down my spine as I bolted for the door. The shadows surged after me, sharp and hungry, whispering promises of fear and sorrow. "Don't run," they hissed, the voices mingling into a cacophony, each word wrapping around me like chains. "Join us! You cannot escape!" Gasping for breath, I fumbled with the door, my hands trembling with pure adrenaline. But the door wouldn't budge. It felt as if every shadow converged, pushing against it from the other side, their collective anger becoming a storm of despair that pressed against me. "Let me out!" I screamed, my voice a wretched cry cutting through the darkness that seemed to swallow me whole. Suddenly, laughter erupted again, this time louder, echoing from behind me as the shadows began to twist and form shapes, dark silhouettes taking on recognizable forms. They morphed into figures of lost loved ones, their faces blending between sorrow and rage. I stumbled back, colliding with something cold, hard, steady. My hand grazed across the wall, and I felt the familiar texture of a picture frame. I ripped it from the wall and smashed it against the floor, shards of glass glittering around me like fallen stars. As they shattered, I felt a surge of defiance. "You are not real. You are just shadows," I cried, forcing myself to face the phantoms that loomed beside me. "We are forever," they shrieked, their voices merging into a dreadful chorus that filled the air with unearthly resonance. The pictures around the room started to tremble, vibrating with each piercing, high-pitched echo. One by one, they began to fall, glass shattering beneath their weight, echoes mixing with my racing heart. In that moment, I felt something snap within me, as if my resolve had turned into a fragile thread, fraying at the edges. "I can't face this alone," I murmured, remembering the flicker of warmth my grandmother had provided. Just then, something drew my gaze, a glimmer in the darkness. It prolonged my heartbeat, revealing one fragile shard of light that flickered amidst the chaotic noise. I focused on it, channeling every remaining ounce of my strength, and willed it to grow. "With love, I command you to leave," I whispered, a desperate plea pushing through my lips. As if answering my call, the shadows surged forward, clawing at the shimmering light. I pushed back, reclaiming power that felt rightfully mine as warmth radiated out from within me, igniting the very essence of my core. Gritting my teeth, I spoke louder. "You have no dominion over me." The shadows writhed, the laughter twisting into furious howls that echoed throughout the room, pounding against my ears. I thought of every cherished moment I held close, the warmth of my mother's embrace, the strength of my grandmother's spirit, the laughter of childhood echoing brightly. "Your hold is weak. Your power is an illusion," I shouted, pushing the light forward until it exploded in radiant brilliance. In that moment, a gust of wind pulled through the doorway, sweeping away the darkness and causing the shadows to scream, their wails twisting into chaos as they disintegrated into wisps of smoke, fading into nothingness. But just before they vanished, one piercing voice cut through the air, chilling my blood. "We will return," it shrieked, echoing in a haunting farewell that lingered long after the night receded. I dropped to my knees, the echoes of their cries saturating the air around me, mingling with the remnants of fear still prickling my skin. The remnants of laughter faded, replaced by an eerie silence, thick and oppressive. As I sat there, breathless and trembling, I felt the weight of their promise resting heavily on my heart. As the darkness receded, leaving me alone once more in the remnants of a shattered night, I understood that my psyche had become a battleground, a realm where shadows would forever haunt my footsteps. No matter how many victories I claimed, the shadows would linger in the corners, waiting for a moment of vulnerability to strike again. But I wasn't done yet. This was merely another chapter in my story, a tale woven through light and dark. As I steadied my breath, I braced myself for what was still to come, prepared to fight back each unsettling night, regardless of the darkness lurking. I wasn't done yet. This was merely another chapter in my story. Days passed since that stormy night, yet each dusk brought with it an unsettling sense of dread. I started to notice things around the house shifting, small objects mysteriously misplaced, like the universe was toying with my sanity. One afternoon, I found my grandmother's locket open on the kitchen table. I could have sworn I'd tucked it away in my drawer, safeguarding it from the darkness. As I picked it up, a chill crawled up my arm, the locket feeling heavier than before. I held it tightly as nostalgia washed over me. Memories of her laughter filled my mind. But that warmth was short-lived, for as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt the familiar tension tightening in the air. Shadows danced around me, each flicker of light in the room became a warning. The evening sky darkened quickly, leaving my home engulfed in deep, shadowy hues. That night I decided to stay vigilant. Armed with candles and my grandmother's locket in hand, I sat cross-legged on the floor, the flickering flames providing a fragile light against the oppressive darkness. The wind howled outside, the branches scraping against the window like skeletal fingers, a haunting reminder of the world beyond the safety of my walls. As I sat there, I kept reminding myself that I was not alone. The light would protect me. Soon, the air grew heavier, thickening with a sense of foreboding. I could hear subtle whispers, laced with my name, curled into the shadows like a haunting song that sent shivers down my spine. "Come play," the eerie whispers beckoned, their tones barely distinguishable from the howling wind outside. I strained to hear as they seemed to drift closer, wrapping around me like a favorite blanket, turning cold and clammy. Suddenly, one of the candles flickered violently, the flame licking the air in a frantic dance before going out. The room plunged into darkness, leaving only the faintest glow from the remaining candles. My heart raced as I felt the shadows thicken around me, rising up like a wall, pushing me into a corner. With desperation, I groped around for a match, striking it with trembling fingers. As the tiny flame ignited, I saw them, small figures emerging from the void, their eyes glinting like shards of broken glass. They moved with an eerie grace, darting between the walls, offering glimpses of their distorted shapes. Twisted limbs and shadowy forms shifted around my peripheral vision, delighting in my fear. "They're just shadows," I told myself, trying to sound brave, even as my voice quavered. "Just tricks of the light." Yet, deep down, I knew they were more than that. They craved something from me, something I couldn't understand. I could feel their yearning, a desperate hunger that clawed at my mind. Each heartbeat echoed as I searched for a way to fend them off. I felt the temperature drop in the room, an unnatural chill that surrounded me, tightening like a vice. My breath clouded in front of me, the dark presence growing bolder. I brought my grandmother's locket closer, praying its warmth could keep the shadows at bay. "Stay away," I shouted, clutching the locket tightly enough to press the metal into my palm. But instead of retreating, the shadows surged forward, and I felt a pull, a magnetic force urging me to surrender. I stumbled backward, my back pressing against the wall as they drew nearer, their voices blending into a haunting chant that vibrated through the air. "Join us," they called, the resonance sending worms of dread slithering through my mind. "It's better here," they whispered, each syllable twisting like a knife, plunging deep into my heart. "No more pain, no more loneliness, just us." In that moment, something inside me snapped. I didn't want to be their prisoner, woven into their tapestry of despair. I grabbed the nearest candle and thrust it toward the shadows, illuminating their forms, forcing my way through their heavy shroud. "Leave me alone!" For a brief moment, the flickering flame pushed them back, slicing through the darkness, illuminating horrid faces twisted in malicious glee. They flickered, shifting and screeching as light danced upon their ghastly visages. But as the candle threatened to burn down, The shadows regrouped, their determination palpable. Before I could react, the wind howled again, a fierce gust blasting through the window, extinguishing the remaining flames. I was plunged into complete darkness once more, panic gripping me hard, squeezing my chest until it was difficult to breathe. But then I remembered my grandmother's locket, and I fumbled for it, holding it tightly against my heart. "You can't have me," I whispered, grounding myself against the cold floor. "I am my own." As if my conviction breathed life into the locket, it suddenly radiated warmth. A soft glow emanated from within it, cutting through the darkness surrounding me. The shadows recoiled, hissing and shrieking, their forms starting to unravel beneath the golden light. "Leave now," I commanded, my voice gaining strength. The glow intensified, washing over the room, illuminating every corner, banishing their twisted shapes. They howled in fury, a cacophony of despair echoing off the walls as they retreated, shadows dissipating like mist into the night. The room filled with light and warmth, but the echo of their promises lingered, a dark reminder that they would not truly vanish. Even as the glow became a comforting beacon, I understood that the shadows would always leave a mark on my soul. As the night wore on, I held the locket close, feeling the warmth pulse against my skin, a reminder of the love that fortified me against the encroaching night. But the next day, as I swept up the remnants of the candle wax and broken glass, I felt the air shift once again. A familiar presence lurked just beyond my perception, a gentle rustle in the corners, a flicker of movement that seemed too sly to ignore. I glanced around, searching for any sign of their return, every instinct shouting at me to be alert. The voice came again, softer now, a whisper brushing against my ear like a cold wind. "We will always be watching." It sent icy fingers crawling down my spine. Panic surged through me again, a primal instinct warning me of what was to come. I had survived the night, but at what cost? As evening approached, I set up extra candles throughout the house, a makeshift barrier against whatever malevolence awaited me in the coming darkness. My heart raced with anticipation, knowing I couldn't let my guard down. Each creak of the floorboards sent waves of unease up my spine, making me hyper-aware of every sound, every tremor within the walls. Shadows lingered in every corner, waiting, wanting. That night, I sat on the floor again, the glow of the candles as my only defense. I could feel heaviness settling over the house, a suffocating silence that weighed down like a thick fog. Outside, the wind raged, reminding me that I was not alone. I could almost hear the laughter mingling with the howl of the wind, playful yet sinister, a warning that echoed deep within my bones. A sudden chill blew through the room, making me shudder. I glanced at the window, watching as shadows flickered against the glass, twisting into shapes that made my skin crawl. It didn't take long before the laughter returned, rising in a chorus of shrieks that shook the very foundations of my home. "Come play with us," they taunted, voices sweetened with malice, their echo bouncing against the walls, burrowing into my mind. I gripped the locket tightly, breathing in its warmth, but the shadows advanced, swirling around me, invading my senses. It felt as if the darkness was no longer just a mere presence. It had multiplied, the whispers growing in volume like an engine revving up. I found myself frozen, unable to move as shadowy hands reached out from the corners, brushing against my skin. The sensation was icy, clawing, and I could feel myself slipping away, lost within the pull of the darkness. "No!" I gasped, throwing myself backwards, scrambling to create distance. But they were closing in, their laughter becoming a maddening crescendo, twisting reality into a nightmare. I could see vague shapes forming, eyes glowing in the darkness, waiting for the moment I would finally succumb. Fear turned to rage as I clawed at the floor, scrambling for the light. "Get away from me!" I yelled, the confidence returning with a newfound strength. Lifting the grandmother's locket high above my head, I called upon its energy, drawing from the love encapsulated within it. "You have no power here. Leave me be." The shadows paused, momentarily startled by my newfound assertiveness. I could feel the pulse of the locket, radiating warmth that pushed against the retching cold closing in around me. The shadows convulsed, hissing in anger, drowning out the echoes of my grandmother's laughter with their menacing wails. "You think you can stop us?" They spat, their voices scraping against my ears like nails on a chalkboard. "I won't be your prisoner," I shouted, reclaiming my ground. With every ounce of willpower, I commanded the light to surge forth, pouring across the floor, chasing away the encroaching darkness. The contrast between light and shadow created an explosion that resonated throughout the room, breaking through their cacophony of rage. The warm glow cast beautiful shapes into the air, illuminating the twisted figures that had haunted me for so long. "You are nothing without fear," I shouted, pushing the light toward the pulsating shadows. With a final scream, they crumbled, defeated yet still whispering their desperate promise. "We will be back. We always will." As I sat there, heart racing, the remnants of the shadows dissipated like echoes into night air. But their presence lingered still, taunting me in the back of my mind. I gasped for breath, released from their grip, but knowing they were always one shadowy breath away from returning. I wanted to believe it was over, but deep down, I felt the disturbance in the air, the shadow of an impending storm on the horizon. As the flickering candlelight gently illuminated my weary form, I knew this wasn't the end. The shadows were merely waiting for the right moment to strike again, clawing at the very fabric of my memories, my fears. I had faced them, but the battle roared on with each passing day, the reminder of their haunting whispers echoing endlessly through each quiet moment I lived. So, I prepared myself for the night ahead, candles glowing around me like guardians, awaiting whatever menacing shapes the dark would take. I would face them again and again until I could reclaim my peace. The war against shadows had only just begun. Every evening, I prepared for battle. I stocked up on candles, lighting them one by one, creating a circle of flickering warmth around me. I tried to convince myself that this would be enough to keep the darkness at bay. Each candle burned low but bright, casting long shadows that danced along the walls, seeming to mock me in their silent laughter. But this time it felt different. I noticed a change in the atmosphere, a weight in the air that thickened with every sunset. It wasn't just the shadows creeping in from the corners. It was as if the very walls were alive, breathing in tandem with my escalating fear. The house groaned like an old beast, settling uneasily, each creak and crack adding to the unease that swirled within me. That night, as the moon hung ominously in the sky, I settled into my usual spot on the floor, the locket resting like a talisman against my heart. The candles flickered, casting my shadow against the wall, larger, angrier, as if sharing my rage against the darkness. I felt the familiar sensation rising, coldness warning me that my adversaries were lurking. I could taste fear in the air, like copper on my tongue. The wind howled again, rattling the windows, and I heard it, the whisper of a child's laughter, echoing faintly from the hallway. At first, it seemed innocent, a playful giggle that wrapped around me like a familiar comfort. But it was followed quickly by a sinister crackle, like dry leaves underfoot, and my heart dropped into my stomach. I stood up cautiously, moving toward the sound that chilled me to my very core. "Hello," I said, my voice trembling as I stepped softly down the hallway, the flickering light casting monstrous shapes along the walls. But my question went unanswered, replaced by an unsettling silence. The laughter seemed to have flitted away, just out of reach, leaving behind an uneasy stillness that enveloped the hallway like a heavy fog. I reached for the light switch, but it flickered, refusing to cooperate. The shadows pooled deeper, becoming thicker as I ventured further. The whispers returned, now sounding more like threats, a cacophony of dark promises swarming around me, swirling like a storm. "Join us," they hissed, the child's laughter now morphing into high-pitched shrieks that ricocheted off the walls. Suddenly, the door at the end of the hallway creaked open. I tensed, breath caught in my throat, My hands shook as I edged closer, heart pounding, the locket against my chest pulsating like a beating heart. Behind that door lay the unknown, a realm I had yet to confront. I hesitated, the cord of shadow stretching out to me, almost inviting me to step forward. With a surge of courage, I pushed the door wide open. A wave of cold air washed over me, filling my lungs with a creeping dread, the darkness beyond feeling sentient. It beckoned, and I could almost feel its fingers reaching for me. The room inside was stagnant, thick with dust and despair, old furniture cloaked under white sheets, like ghosts waiting for a release from centuries of slumber. My eyes scanned the dim room, searching for signs of life or unlife. The shadows shifted, contorting in ways that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. I stepped inside, dragging my foot against the floor, the sound echoing like a drumbeat in the stillness. In that moment, the laughter bubbled into a ghoulish giggle, sounding all too close, a whisper that rattled the very foundation of my being. Suddenly, a picture fell from the wall, shattering against the floor, pieces scattering like jagged teeth. The glass glimmered dangerously, and I felt the light of my candles dim, shadows stretching like claws towards me. Panic flooded my veins as I stumbled back, almost slipping on the broken glass. "Stop it!" I shouted into the void, forcing my voice to shatter the thick blanket of quiet that hung over me. "Whatever you are, leave me alone!" I clutched the locket tightly, hoping its warmth would anchor me in the suffocating dark. Yet the shadows responded, flooding closer in my direction. They pulsed and writhed, malicious joy etched into their twisting forms. Faces began to materialize in the darkness, hollow-eyed and gaunt, swirling through the air just beyond the reach of my flickering light. They beckoned me with grotesque smiles, whispering secrets of despair and loneliness that clawed at my mind. One shadow detached itself from the group, moving with a sickening grace, embodying the childish laughter I had heard earlier. A small figure, but its eyes held darkness beyond comprehension. The laughter morphed into something horrifying, a sound that could break the strongest resolve. It pointed a tiny finger at me, and I felt a chill crawl down my spine as it whispered, "Come play with us forever." Terror surged within me. I felt my resolve crumbling. Memories of laughter now twisted into something grotesque, the innocence of childhood shattered by the taint of darkness. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. Instead, I turned and ran back to the door, heart thundering in my chest. The shadows hissed in anger, their voices rising to a shrill pitch, as if offended by my defiance. I burst into the hallway, slamming the door behind me, gasping for breath. The weight of their presence felt heavy, pressing against me, as if they were desperately trying to seep through the wood. I leaned against the door, hearing their furious whispers simmer behind it. The entire house felt alive, pulsing with an energy that left me feeling smaller, more vulnerable. I needed to escape, to find a way out before they consumed me whole. But as I opened my eyes, I realized the shadows weren't confined to that room anymore. They were everywhere, in every corner, every crevice, whispering through the walls. "You cannot hide from us." Their voices echoed through the house, taunting me, turning familiar spaces into a nightmarish landscape. Each step I took felt like I was moving deeper into their domain. I rushed toward the staircase, looking for refuge, but only found deeper shadows waiting below. The house felt like a labyrinth, every hallway winding back toward the heart of the darkness. In a frenetic bid for safety, I forced myself up the stairs, breathless and terrified. I reached the landing, where a window overlooked the front yard, moonlight spilling in like liquid silver. I stumbled toward it, wanting to feel the cool night air on my face. A reminder of the world outside, the world that still held some light, a place where shadows couldn't breathe like they could hear. As I reached for the window, a cold wind rushed through, slamming it shut with a bone-jarring thud. The mood shifted instantly, the air becoming thick, suffocating. I turned around to face the hallway, and that's when I saw them. The figures weren't just shadows anymore. They were solidifying, forming a grotesque narrative of lost souls. Each face was a twisted mimic of sorrow, their eyes wide with a pain that resonated deep within me. The girl child was among them, her once innocent laughter reduced to a haunting wail that echoed through the corridor. "You can't escape," she cried, her voice serrated with anguish. "We're all waiting for you." In that moment, a sense of despair washed over me, an understanding that this was merely the beginning of something dark and eternal. Their whispers became a deafening roar, promising to envelop me, to pull me into their fold. I pressed my back against the wall, eyes darting to the stairs, searching for an escape. But each direction felt blocked, the shadows closing in like a noose around my throat, tightening slowly. My heart raced as I fought against the pull of surrender. "You don't belong here," I shouted, feeling the warmth of the locket reignite my courage. It pulsed against my skin like a heart, reminding me of all the love lost but still present in my memory. As I channeled that warmth, I felt its strength surge within me. With a primal scream, I thrust my hands forward, feeling the light radiate from the locket, bursting forth like a flare lighting up the night sky. "Begone!" I screamed, pushing the light deeper into the shadows, burning against their twisted forms. They recoiled, howls of fury filling the air as the light struck them, their shapes disintegrating into wisps that whirled and faded like smoke carried off on a strong breeze. But for every shadow that disintegrated, others surged forward, thrumming with insatiable energy, ready to take their place. This was not over. Even as I battled, I could feel their hunger, a thirst for my very essence that sent waves of icy fear crashing over me. I knew I had to escape, but exhaustion clawed at my limbs, and I felt the fight slipping through my fingers like grains of sand in a relentless tide. As I staggered backward, I realized I was trapped. I did not merely face a collection of shadows. This was a collective of souls, tormented and angry, pooling their power against me. I fought to catch my breath, my locket flickering under the increased pressure. I had no choice but to retreat. Suddenly, I whipped around and bolted down the stairs, adrenaline shooting through my veins. As I neared the front door, I could hear their shouts, enraged howls vibrating off the walls behind me. "I won't let you in," I yelled, racing toward the exit as the shadows chased after me, their presence hot on my heels. The door stood resilient, and I grabbed the handle, yanking it hard. But it resisted, the force of the darkness threatening to pin me down, pulling me backwards into their impending grasp. "Join us!" Their whispers rose in a united chant, stretching out toward me as I fought against them. Their familiarity gnawed at my sanity, the call to surrender becoming an unbearable itch at the back of my mind. I knew I couldn't give in. Summoning every ounce of strength, I pushed against the door with a primal scream, the sound reverberating through my chest. Just as I felt the air shift behind me, the sudden warmth of light split through the gaps, the night beckoning just outside. In a final act of desperation, I burst through the doorway, stumbling onto the porch. I felt exhilaration flare as I embraced the cool night air, free from the suffocating darkness for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The shadows lingered, snarling from the other side, their forms stretching toward me, but I stood firm, realizing I was no longer alone. The moon hung bright above, a beacon amidst the chaos. "You can't have me," I shouted, holding the locket up high, as if it was a sword, ready to defend myself from their grasping fingers. But the battle waged on. I knew the night was just a prelude to the terror that awaited me. I could feel their cries pulsing in the darkness, echoing in my mind as they promised to return. I had survived for now, but the shadows would never truly be gone. As I looked back at my home, I knew it was a battleground, and those shadows would always be waiting for the light to dim, for my defenses to drop. The night was far from over, and the fight to reclaim my peace had only just begun. Standing on the porch, I caught my breath, feeling the cool air bite at my skin, a startling contrast to the suffocating dark. Ness I had just escaped. The moon glowed brightly above me, casting luminous beams that cut through the shadows creeping at the edges of my property. But even in the light, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching me, ever present and lurking just beyond the reach of the illumination. I peered back at my home, its familiar shapes now cast into grotesque figures by the moonlight. The shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting like restless spirits caught in torment. I took a step forward, my feet crunching against the gravel, hoping the sound would somehow guide me back to safety. But the shadows responded, whispering through the wind, and the dim light around me seemed to waver, as if assessing my resolve. My heart raced as I listened closely, trying to pick out their words from the cacophony. "You can't run from what you are," a voice cooed, soothing yet edged with malice. A chill skipped down my spine, sending my instincts screaming for me to flee. But where could I go? The darkness felt inescapable, like it was part of the very fabric of the world outside. Here I was, stranded and exposed, trembling as the shadows began to swirl around me, reassembling themselves into shapes that felt all too familiar. I filled my lungs with courage and turned back toward the house, adrenaline igniting my senses. Pushing through the door, I entered my home where the candles still flickered dimly, each flame struggling against the twilight that seeped through the windows. I grabbed another candle, lighting it with the tip of an unused match. As the flame caught, it flared brightly for a moment, illuminating the faces of those shadowed figures one last time before they hunched back, retreating into the corners as if they feared the light. Good, I thought, buoyed by renewed strength, but still aware of the lingering threats. I needed to fortify myself. I hurried through the house, gathering candles to form a protective barrier in the living room, a sanctum against the assault of the eternal night. Each candle became a sentinel, its flickering glow illuminating the truth. The shadows were waiting, hungry and insatiable, biding their time for an opening. Minutes felt like hours as I hastily assembled my line of defense, drawing comfort from the warm glow. As I settled back against the wall, feeling the pulse of the locket comforting me, I kept my eyes on the shadows, willing them to reveal their next move. But nothing happened. Silence enveloped the house, thick and oppressive, weighing heavier each moment. Then, suddenly, I heard it again, the soft laughter echoing and echoing, bouncing off the walls like a cruel melody. This time, it was no longer playful. It was darker, more sinister, laced with something that felt dangerously close to glee. Goosebumps erupted on my skin, the warning whisper wrapping around me like a cold, suffocating blanket. "Find us," the voice teased, sounding almost like a beckoning call, inviting me to join the twisted game. I clenched my fists, heart pounding furiously. "No, I won't," I shouted into the abyss. But the shadows only swirled in response, growing bolder, inching closer, as the laughter reached a crescendo, vibrating through the very floor beneath me. Panic surged as I realized how flimsy my candle barrier was against the weight of their wrath. It happened so fast. Just as I braced myself, the shadows surged, darting toward me like a dark wave crashing against a fragile shoreline. I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling the air grow thick and damp, colder than anything I had ever experienced. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass split the air, followed by a chilling, gigglish shriek, and instinct kicked in. I flung myself from my spot on the floor, scrambling away from the approaching tide. I raced toward the hallway, unsure of where to go, but needing to escape their spell. Whatever remnants of courage I had pooled in the living room felt distant. The shadows pursued me like ravenous wolves, their screams mingling with the cries of those who had once been victims, people who had vanished without a trace. The house felt larger, stretching infinitely as I dashed from room to room, the shadows trailing behind me, a palpable entity that hungered for my fear. "You can't run. We're coming for you," they howled, rage twisting their words, growing louder as the walls of the house seemed to shrink in around me. I flung open doors, desperately searching for an escape, but each room morphed into a labyrinth, elongating into nothingness as the laughter echoed chillingly. Then I remembered the attic, an old, dusty sanctuary that felt untouched by the darkness. The stairway was narrow and steep, a shortcut to the one place where I might still find solace. I barreled toward it, my breath escaping in frantic bursts. The shadows twisted behind me, clawing at my heels, almost closing the distance, their fingers feeling so very real. Just as I reached the bottom of the attic stairs, a cold gust of wind swept through the house, slamming the door shut behind me. Panic gripped my chest as the shadows hissed angrily, thrumming with energy as if they would somehow break through the walls to reach me. I leaped up the steps, the old wood creaking beneath my weight, springing into the attic just as the door rattled violently behind me. In the attic, dust floated in the air, illuminated by the ethereal moonlight spilling through the narrow windows. Boxes were strewn around, and old furniture loomed ominously. I hurriedly pushed a heavy trunk in front of the door, my heart racing as I heard the shadows crash against the barrier. I glanced around wildly, looking for something, anything, that would help me cleanse this space of the darkness gnawing at my sanity. That's when I noticed a rug in the corner, worn but seemingly out of place, its vibrant colors a stark contrast to the faded wood and dust. I approached it, uncertainty creeping in. Yanking it back revealed a trapdoor secured with rusted hinges. Breathless, hope sparked in my heart. Could this be another escape route? I didn't have time to ponder deeper. The shadows howled from the door, inches away from breaking through. I pried the trapdoor open, its creaking protesting as the darkness raged behind me. The hole was just large enough for me to squeeze through. I knew I had to take the chance, to dive into the unknown, where I hoped the shadows could not follow. I slid through, heart in my throat, dropping into the hidden space below. The air grew cooler, and the strong scent of damp earth and something else, something acrid, filled my nostrils. I landed with a quiet thud, my pulse roaring in my ears as I realized I was in a cellar, obscured from the world above. The shadows thundered above me, their disembodied voices screaming in frustration. "You can't hide. You are ours." The words seeped through the boards above, relentless as they urged me to flee, to succumb to their chaotic call. I breathed deeply, heart hammering, and quickly scanned my surroundings. The cellar was small, but filled with old relics covered in cobwebs. A faint light flickered in the far corner, perhaps another candle or something akin to it. I stumbled toward it, almost dropping to my knees as I noticed a single candle still standing amidst the clutter. Its wax was melted, but the wick remained unburned, defying the encroaching shadows. I lit it with trembling hands, watching as a warm glow filled the small room, pushing back some of the darkness. But there was no comfort in it, just an awareness that I had traded one battle for another. Shadows loomed even here, more Mina, seeing as they crept into the edges of the candlelight, swirling like a living fog. Breath hitching, I looked around for another way out, straining against the echoes of laughter and whispers that threatened to engulf me even in this hidden refuge. I spotted an old window above a pile of forgotten crates, rusted but perhaps just large enough for me to squeeze through. I climbed toward it, each move feeling like I was being hunted, the shadows clawing at my sanity, whispering riddles of despair in my ears. Just as I reached the crates, a sharp crack echoed behind me. I turned around to see the trapdoor above me splintering open, darkness pouring through like an oil slick. Panic flooded me once more, and I fought against the crates, scrambling to reach the window. The shadows took form. I could almost see their faces twisting in fury, eyes glowing with an insatiable need to snatch me from the light. With a burst of strength, I pushed up, feeling the cold glass graze my palm as I clawed my way through. But the shadows surged closer, and I could hear their furious screeches mingling with the guttural growls of something far more sinister, emerging from their depths. "You can't escape. We own you." I finally shoved my torso through the window, the shards of glass digging into my skin. Pain lanced through me, but there was no time to dwell on it. I squeezed my way through, feeling the shadows claw at my heels as I fell into the rear garden, landing abruptly on the overgrown grass. I gasped for air, the night sky sprawling above me, stars seeming like distant guardians in the chaos. For a brief moment, I did not feel their presence looming overhead. But looking back, I saw them gathering at the window, their forms all sharp angles and anguished eyes, the laughter morphing into pure rage as they realized their prize was escaping. "You can't keep running," they screamed, thundering voices echoing through the air, rattling my very bones. I turned and bolted toward the forest bordering my yard, knowing deep down that I could never truly escape. The trees loomed tall and foreboding, branches reaching like skeletal fingers. They offered no comfort, but they provided the only way to gain distance from the shadows that hungered for me. As I dashed into the darkness, the moonlight flickered through the trees, illuminating the twisted roots and thorny bushes that clawed at my limbs. Each step down the jagged path was fraught with danger. The shadows followed closely, their murmurs swirling around me, pulling at my resolve. "You're lost now," their voices trailed behind like a haunting lullaby, teasing to bring me back to their haven. Suddenly, up ahead, I spotted a clearing, light spilling in like a beacon, bright and vibrant compared to the suffocating darkness trailing me. It beckoned. I sprinted toward it, heart pounding, not stopping to consider what lay beyond. The laughter crescendoed to a furious roar as I broke free of the trees and fell into the clearing, skidding to a halt. The moon hung full above, illuminating an aged circular stone well nestled in the ground. Its stones were worn smooth with time, vines creeping over it like fingers reaching from the earth. I stumbled toward it, breathless, needing to escape. Behind me, I could sense the shadows hesitating, swirling like a dark mist, trying to decide whether to pursue me further or retreat into the safety of the trees. Even in the light of the moon, something felt wrong about the well. Its mouth was black, infinite, an inky void that seemed to whisper of unspeakable horrors. I could hear muffled voices emanating from the depths, a symphony of anguish and sorrow. "Join us," they beckoned, mixing despair with hope, simply drawing me closer to the edge. Perched beside it, I couldn't help but lean over, the darkness inside pulling at my very soul. A moment of clarity struck amidst the chaos. This wasn't just an escape or a path to solace. It felt like a point of no return. I recoiled, fighting against the pull, the well almost perfect in its design to ensnare. But the shadows behind me were no longer waiting or wavering. They surged forward, billowing like smoke, arms reaching out in a desperate grasp for my essence. I stumbled back, teetering on the edge, fear gripping me with icy fingers. "You can't fight us," they shrieked as the air turned electric around me, a palpable energy crackling like a storm about to unleash its fury. With one final, desperate cry, I realized I had no choice. I had to confront them, to face the very darkness that claimed to own me. Clutching the locket in my hand, I summoned the last ounce of strength within me. In a moment of pure defiance, I shouted into the darkness, "I will not be yours. You have no hold over me." A brilliant light exploded from the locket, brighter than the moon above, the essence of my memories surrounding me, igniting my courage. Even the shadows flinched. The shadows recoiled as if slapped by an invisible hand, their forms twisting and shrieking, anguish echoing against the night. I felt the surge of warmth flood through me, wrapping me in a cocoon of golden light. My heart raced with newfound power, a rush that coursed through my veins like wildfire. Each pulse fed the flame, and I pushed forward, determined to drive them back. In that moment, the clearing transformed into a battleground, an arena of light against darkness. I took a step toward the swirling shadows, the light from the locket piercing through them like a sword through silk. The shadows shrieked and howled, desperate to flee, but unable to withstand the brilliance. "You cannot hold on to this," one voice shouted, resonating with pure venom. It was a deep, guttural sound that echoed in my mind, wrapping around it like a vice. I felt a flicker of doubt, nagging at the edges of my courage, threatening to unravel my resolve. But just as quickly, the warmth surged again, pushing back the doubt, and I pressed on. The wind picked up, swirling around me, carrying their whispers like a taunt. "You belong to us. You are one of us," they clamored, voices merging into a chaotic symphony that buzzed in my ears, drowning out everything else. Each declaration felt like ice, threatening to seep into my heart, to cage me in fear again. I shivered but held strong, focusing on the light, my light. Suddenly, the shadows lunged, pooling together as they morphed into a single, monstrous entity, larger than anything I'd faced. It was a swirling mass of darkness, fierce eyes glinting with malice, peering straight into my soul. Its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth, a gaping chasm that seemed to beckon me toward it. "Join us. Embrace the darkness," it rasped, the very ground vibrating with its menacing presence. A deep fear gripped me, flickering too close to a memory of helplessness. It felt so convincing, so inviting, like a call to surrender. I felt sweat bead on my forehead, the grip of the shadows around me tightening like a noose. I fought back, pushing the light outward, letting it expand like an explosion. "No!" I shouted, my voice echoing back at me. I would not succumb. The shadow entity recoiled, the agony in its form rippling like a wave, distorting into grotesque parodies of faces I recognized, friends, loved ones, twisted into images of despair. "You cannot keep running from the truth," those faces whispered, sorrow dripping from their lips, morphing back into the ever-growing darkness surrounding me. My heart sank, a tumult of emotions brewing within me. I shook my head violently, tears forming in my eyes, caught between love and despair. "I won't be like you." The locket pulsed again, and just as I thought I had lost my will, a burst of raw energy surged through me, clearing my mind and igniting fierce determination. I summoned every memory of joy, every glance of love shared, and every laughter that filled my heart. I pictured my family, their smiles etching into my mind with vivid clarity. Gripping the locket tightly, I shouted once more, "You don't own me. I am free." The light from the locket exploded outward, a bright phoenix rising from the ashes, sunlight clashing against the darkness. It encircled me, forming a protective barrier, pushing against the monstrous shadow. The entity let out a howl, a sound so chilling that it resonated through the air, powerful enough to shake the very ground I stood on. "You think this will save you?" It seethed, the frustration barely contained as my light continued to push against its form. "You cannot escape what you are. We'll always be here." I felt the truth creep in, and for a fleeting moment, I almost believed it. Could I ever outrun the shadows of my past? But I didn't have time to question. They were not just memories. They were tormentors, a reminder of everything I feared becoming. "No!" I screamed, ready to change the narrative. "I will be more than this. I will not let you define me." I pushed harder, the light flaring to life like a sunburst, illuminating the remnants of my courage and searing through the darkness. I lunged forward, arms outstretched, feeling the rush of energy through my body. The light cracked like thunder, and the shadows began to retreat, shrieking as the fire of my spirit illuminated their darkness. With each pulse of light, they fragmented, breaking apart like shards of glass scattering in the wind. Their shrieks grew fainter, drowned out by the roar of my heart, thumping defiantly in my chest. But just when I thought victory was near, a chilling voice rose from the depths, echoing from the very heart of darkness. "You think you've won? This is just the beginning." The ground itself trembled, and the stillness of the clearing shattered as the realm around me flickered, the trees and sky distorting into a surreal nightmare. The well behind me bubbled ominously as darkness seeped from its depths, slithering across the ground like a snake preparing to strike. "We will find you again," the voices echoed, thickening the air around me, blocking out the light. "No matter where you run," they taunted, the sorrow and anger crashing together, until I could almost feel their desperation. I stumbled back, glancing around for a way out, but the light was dimming, and shadows were creeping in again, threatening to reclaim me. I felt the walls of the clearing closing in, suffocating me under their weight. Panic surged anew as I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows had tricked me into thinking I had a moment's peace. My instincts sparked urgency, and I bolted from the clearing, racing back into the dark forest, where the moonlight dimmed under the canopy of twisted branches. The air grew heavy as I pressed on, the roots grasping at my feet like spectral fingers, trying to hold me back. I could still hear them behind me, the laughter echoing in my mind, a never-ending chant promising an inevitable return. "We're coming for you," echoed from all directions, sending a fresh wave of terror through my veins. I felt the weight of their promise. I was not free. Rushing through the trees, I stumbled blindly down the overgrown path. Desperation clawed at my heart as exhaustion threatened to drag me down. The shadows were relentless, tracking my every move, and I could sense them funneling through the trees, seeking my weakness. As I ran, I spotted a flicker of light ahead. My heart soared with hope, driven by the instinct to reach whatever safety could lie beyond. But the closer I got, the more sinister that light appeared. It pulsed erratically, not steady like the candlelight I had relied on. It shimmered and shifted like a mirage, transforming the trees around it into warped and twisted shapes, forming something dangerously alluring. I froze for a moment, the chill of recognition washing over me. The light enveloped an old, decrepit lantern hanging from a gnarled branch. Its glow turned the woodland scenes into cartoonish creatures, grotesque with smiles that twisted too wide. This wasn't a sanctuary, it was a trap. I felt the pull of darkness wrestling with my desire to approach, each step closer, filling me with dread. "Come closer," the light called sweetly, laced with a honeyed tone that sent chills down my spine. "We're waiting," it cooed, the shadows lunging toward me as if drawn to an unseen force. I shook myself, fighting against whatever enchantment threatened to pull me in. The shadows thrived on my fear, their energy thick in the air. My heart raced as I turned to flee again. But the tendrils of darkness wrapped around my ankles, dragging me back toward that cursed light. Desperately, I focused on the locket, now dim but not extinguished. I recalled the warmth, the love that had fueled my spirit thus far. With every ounce of strength left, I shouted, "I choose the light." The words ripped from my throat, raw and defiant, as the force surged through my body, tearing the darkness away. With a monumental effort, I broke free from the shadowy tendrils, stumbling away from the well of flickering light. The illusions crashed behind me like waves, collapsing under the weight of my determination. I dared not look back, sprinting as fast as I could, my instincts guiding me deeper into the forest. But then the laughter morphed. It transformed into a cacophony of cries, agonized, empty. They echoed all around me, fueled by despair. "You think you are free?" They wept, each word pulling at my heart, slicing through the shadows closing in. "We'll never let you go." My breath came in quick bursts, the forest pressing down on me, branches reaching out, swiping at my skin as if intent on dragging me back into the nightmares thrumming at the edge of my vision. I did not stop, each step feeling like a race against fate, knowing the lurking shadows were relentless. As I ran, the air grew heavy, saturated with unease, twisting around me like a vice. A clearing ahead beckoned, but this one felt different, eerie. It was too still, too quiet. I hesitated at the edge, the ground churning beneath me like a live wire. "Join us," the shadows whispered enticingly, wrapping around me every which way, gentler now as their persistence transformed into a sickly sweet embrace. Great dread coiled around my heart, and I longed to flee. What waited in the clearing remained hidden in the depths of moonlight and shadow, but I could sense the weight of something powerful. Mustering all my courage, I stepped forward, ready to confront whatever terror lay ahead. As I crossed into the space, the shadows pulsed, All at once, a vision appeared, a reflection of my own fears and regrets twisted grotesquely into reality. I saw myself, encased in darkness, losing everything I held dear, succumbing to despair. A scream built up in my throat, and in that terrifying moment, I grasped hold of the locket tight. "You won't take me," I yelled, forcing the light to burst forth, shattering the dark haze surrounding me. I surged forward, the shadows melting away under my fierce resolve, but in their place emerged a figure veiled in darkness. It stood tall, a silhouette against the flickering remnants of twilight. Its eyes glowed a wicked crimson, piercing through the murky layer of darkness, watching me with an insatiable hunger. "You think you can defy your fate?" it hissed, the air vibrating with disdain. It stepped closer, and I noticed tendrils of shadow flicking out from its form like serpents ready to strike. "You are mine to claim." I felt the weight of despair tugging at me, those once comforting memories morphing into chains that threatened to bind me. "I won't be bound to you," I cried out, feeding on the light within the locket, tilting my chin up defiantly. But as the figure drew closer, something inside me began to twist. I felt the pull to join them, to give in and let the shadows consume me. The warmth of the locket pulsed erratically in my hand, dimming under the overwhelming pressure. With trembling limbs, I glanced around the clearing, assessing what lay beyond. I caught sight of an old stone monument blanketed in vines, shadowed yet oddly inviting. What secrets lay beneath its worn surface? Could that be the answer to overcoming this malevolent force? Just as the cloak of dread felt like it would swallow me whole, a sudden thought sparked in my mind. What if I could turn the tide and harness the very shadows that sought to ensnare me? I straightened, gripping the locket firmly as I faced the figure and the encroaching shadows behind it. "You think you can terrify me? You'll only strengthen my will." The shadows seemed to shudder, surprise flickering across their forms as a new resolve washed over me. I concentrated, letting the warmth of my memories intertwine with the essence of my fear. "I can take back what is mine," I declared. The light ignited once more, illuminating the clearing in a flood of warmth, pushing the shadows back momentarily. The figure faltered, its surprise morphing into rage. "You think you are clever," it roared, tendrils whipping out toward me. But I was ready. I thrust my hand forward, channeling every ounce of defiance, the light uncoiling from me like a living thread, shining brighter the more I summoned it. The shadows shrieked, a high-pitched wail that reverberated through the clearing, shaking the very air. Tendrils writhed in panic, recoiling from my radiance as I pushed back against the darkness. "You will not take me," I yelled, my voice rising above the chaos, filled with new conviction. The figure faltered, its form flickering like an old film reel caught in a projector's gears. I saw the rage flicker in its eyes, deep pools of malice swirling like storm clouds. Each pulse of light from my locket pushed it back, revealing the contours of its grotesque visage. But in the dimness, it still loomed larger than life. As the shadows retreated, something began to shift beneath my feet. The ground trembled, and the air crackled, as though the very earth was awakening from slumber. I felt a deep-rooted fear rise within me. The shadows were not merely passive. They were angry, and they were not going to let this end quietly. Suddenly, the ground erupted, sending dirt and stones flying in all directions. A deep, hollow growl emerged, echoing from beneath the soil as roots twisted violently, snaking up like gnarled fingers reaching for me. I stumbled backward, heart racing, as the earth itself seemed to join the malevolent force. The figure grinned, its mouth stretching wide to an unnatural extent, revealing rows of teeth that gleamed with anticipation. "You awaken the old ones," it hissed, voice dripping with dark amusement. "They thrive on fear and despair. You can't escape them." The ground beneath erupted, revealing a dark chasm where the roots twisted like serpents in a thrashing dance, ready to claim me. From the abyss, shadows clawed their way out, seeping into the clearing like smoke pouring from a fire. I could sense them pooling around me, wrapping around my ankles, trying to drag me to where they came from. "You're never alone," the figure taunted, its shadowy fingers beckoning forth more of its brethren. My breath quickened as I felt their chill seep into my bones, drowning out my light, their whispered promises slithering into my mind. "Join us. Become part of the dark. This is your truth." I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the noise, the temptations wrapping around my soul like chains. In that moment of utter desperation, I thought of the love I had fought to protect, the warmth of it filling my chest. I couldn't let them win. Gripping the locket with renewed fervor, I hissed through clenched teeth, "This isn't my truth," pumping every ounce of light I had left into it. I directed my energy downward, toward the abyss. "You will not own me." The brilliance shot from the locket, illuminating the darkness in a blinding white flash. The shadows recoiled, contorting in agony as my light crashed down upon them, forcing them back into the chasm. I felt the heaviness lift, the tendrils of despair loosening their grip as I pressed forward. I was pushing against something ancient, something primal, and I could feel its desperation to reclaim me. But just when I thought I was gaining ground, the earth itself groaned, splitting wide open as a deep rumble echoed across the clearing. From the fissure, more shadows surged upward, twisting around the figure, strengthening it as the ancient darkness joined its ranks. With renewed energy, it lunged at me, the air suddenly charged with malice. "You cannot fight what you are," it growled, now a chorus of shadows gathering around its base, merging into a swirling storm. I felt its energy push against me, a tide threatening to drown out my light. The clearing warped, reality bending at the edges as the darkness began to form shapes. Nightmarish creatures elongated and grotesque, their eyes gleaming with hunger, mouths stretching open wide as they crawled free from the shadow's embrace. I could see them advancing, a horde ready to claw at my very being. "You have awakened us. Now you must pay the price," the figure shrieked, the shadows swirling behind it like a mass of dark smoke. Panic surged like wildfire. I turned back toward the forest, my only escape route now shrouded in an ominous haze as the trees warped into twisted figures, their branches grasping for me like talons. I had to escape. I spun around just in time to see several shadow beasts erupting from the chasm, their forms still shifting and flickering in and out of existence. They darted toward me with unnatural speed, movements too fluid and swift to be real, a nightmare made flesh. Each step felt like running through molasses, time stretching and bending, limbs heavy with dread. "Run!" my mind screamed, urging me forward as I sprinted toward the forest's edge, heart hammering wildly in my chest. The howls of the shadows echoed behind me, their phantom laughter filling the air with a sickening thrill. Every instinct screamed in protest, but I couldn't afford to look back. Branches whipped against my skin, sharp and unforgiving, but I pushed through. Dark shapes continued to surge behind me, closing the distance. I could hear their snarls, echoing my fears, urging me to stop, promising release if I'd just surrender. Bursting into a small glade, I felt a sudden, unsettling chill. The moon loomed overhead, its light failing to penetrate the pervasive gloom that settled in the air. Something about this place felt wrong, suffocating, a darkness that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the earth. I knew I couldn't stop now. In desperation, I skimmed my surroundings, searching for anything to counter this creeping dread. My gaze fell upon an old stone altar in the center of the glade, its surface covered in dark, wet moss. Small engravings of ancient symbols twisted around its edges, hinting at forgotten rituals, lost amid the shadows that seemed to dance around them. This could hold the key, I thought, every nerve in my body crying out to act. I rushed toward the altar, my heart pounding, drawing the shadows in closer. They snarled, their patience wearing thin, the dread of what would happen if they caught me now settling like ice in my veins. I climbed onto the altar, desperate, and willing to confront whatever ancient powers lurked in this haunted place. My fingers brushed against the cold stone, searching the carvings for some fragment of light within the foreboding shadows. Suddenly, the engravings pulsed in response to my touch, glowing faintly as though awakening from a long slumber. "Feed me your essence," a low voice rasped, emerging from the stone itself, sending vibrations rippling through the air. "I can grant you power." In that instant, doubt rose like bile in my throat. Was this another trick? I could feel the shadows closing in, the frantic hunger of their presence demanding I submit. "No!" I shouted defiantly. "I won't become another pawn in this game." The shadows recoiled, as if stung by my refusal, the figure's laughter reverberating through the glade in a mad chorus of desperation. "You think you can resist the darkness?" it howled, anger cracking through the once melodious taunts. But as I steadied my breath, focusing on the altar, I felt a warmth radiating from it. I pressed harder against the stone, whispering the memories of love and light, pleading for them to merge with the darkness in a way that could overpower my fears. With one final surge, I shouted, "I choose my path. I will carve my truth." The symbols glowed intensely, pulsing like the drum of my heart, intertwining my essence with theirs. Shadows shrieked, a deafening sound that shattered the night, echoing into the ether. A blinding light erupted from the altar, engulfing me as the shadows screamed, their forms writhing in agony. I felt the energy below me surge, connecting with roots and spirits far older than I had ever imagined. "This power is mine," I declared, feeling the very fabric of fear unravel. As the beam of light pierced through the darkness, merging with the shadows, a whirlwind of energy swirled around me, responding to my command. The shadows began to warp and twist, struggling against the sheer force of my will. "You can't control me," I laughed, the exhilaration flooding through my veins. The air crackled, atoms vibrating under the weight of my challenge. The darkness, powerful and vicious, fought back, but I could feel it losing ground. "You will pay," the figure screeched, its form flickering wildly, splintering into shards of darkness that no longer resembled what they had been. I was pushing them back, reclaiming my spirit, but I could sense the ancient entity becoming furious. It lashed out, sending waves of shadow reeling toward me, creating a storm of darkness that threatened to obliterate the light I held. "You think you've mastered this? The shadows will always be within you." I braced against the onslaught, feeling the pressure intensify, the shadows coiling tightly around me, but I focused on the warmth rising within. "No, you are wrong," I cried. The altar surged with energy, and I released every ounce of light, combining it with the shadows, embracing both as I fought to redefine this battle. I didn't want to deny the darkness. I needed to face it. The shadows shrieked in response, swirling wildly in a frenzy, the pressure building to a dizzying crescendo. The glade transformed, shadows and light dancing violently, creating a tempest of energy that threatened to consume everything. "Face me," I bellowed, sending the power from the altar ripping through everything, shattering the illusions and the darkness that clung to my very essence. With every ounce of rage and courage, I embraced the swirling chaos, allowing it to engulf me, heart racing, mind screaming, but understanding that this was my battle and it must be fought. If I accepted the darkness, I could wield it, transform it into something that belonged to me rather than letting it consume me. The shadows writhed, and in that moment of clarity, I reached within myself, finding the flicker of hope buried among the fears. I grasped at it, pulling it forth like a lifeline. The light exploded again as I became a beacon in the darkness, creating a rift that echoed through the forest. "I am both," I roared, shaking the glade to its core. "I control my fate." A thunderous brilliance erupted from the altar, engulfing everything, and suddenly, silence fell. The shadows withdrew, retreating back into the dark recesses of the forest, the figure's anguished scream echoing in retreat. I stood there, heart pounding, the silence pressing in around me as the last echoes of darkness faded away. But I knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. The shadows may have retreated for now, but they would be back. I could feel their presence lurking at the fringes of my mind, a wicked reminder of their promise to return. Breathless, I stumbled away from the altar, my body trembling with exhaustion. I had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but I wasn't the same. I could still feel their whispers swirling around me, and deep fear tinged with familiar shadows hung overhead. I had won the battle, but not the war. As I slipped back into the labyrinth of trees, a part of me still yearned for the dawn, for the safety of the light. But the chilling reminder of what I had faced weighed heavily on my heart. The shadows would always be a part of me, lurking, waiting for the opportunity to reclaim what they believed was theirs. I had embraced the darkness, but I knew this was just a prelude, a glimpse of what was yet to come. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I wouldn't just wait for them to return. I would be ready. I had embraced the darkness, but I knew this was just a prelude, a glimpse of what was yet to come. Night settled heavier around me, the air thickening with an unsettling weight as I trudged back through the forest. Each step pulsed with the echoes of what had just happened, shadows still flickering at the edges of my vision, whispering taunts that tugged at the edges of my mind. My heart raced, pounding a frantic rhythm as I felt eyes lurking just beyond the tree line, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their gnarled branches swaying menacingly, casting twisted shapes across the ground. I could hear the wind howling, almost like it carried the cries of the shadows. What if they returned? What if they brought more with them? Dread coiled in my stomach as I quickened my pace, wanting desperately to put distance between myself and the dark altar that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. As I navigated the dense underbrush, I stumbled upon a narrow pathway, barely visible, overgrown with thorns and brambles. It twisted deeper into the forest, shrouded in an impenetrable darkness that seemed more suffocating with every step I took. Something drew me in, an insatiable curiosity that clashed with the primal instinct to flee. Despite the fear clenching my heart, I chose to follow the path. Maybe I could uncover what the shadows sought. Maybe it would lead me to answers that could arm me against them. The deeper I went, the more the surroundings transformed. The air grew colder, and the damp earth beneath my feet felt more like a saturated sponge, pulling at my shoes, slowing my progress. Suddenly, a low growl echoed in the stillness, vibrating in my bones. I froze, breath caught in my throat, straining to comprehend where it had come from. My heart drummed in my chest, matched only by the rhythmic rustle of something moving in the underbrush. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end, a primal instinct to run pushing against my limbs. As I scanned the darkness, the shadows shifted, twisting and curling around each other like smoke. Then, from the depths of the thicket, something emerged, a pair of glowing eyes piercing through the veil of night. Not human, but something far more sinister. My breath turned shallow, and panic surged through me as a creature emerged, its form vaguely resembling a wolf, but twisted into something nightmarish. Its fur was matted and dark, riddled with what looked like shadows themselves, absorbing the light around it and blending seamlessly into the night. It stood taller than any wolf should, its limbs elongated and unnatural. The creature tilted its head, sniffing the air, and I could see rows of sharp teeth flash in a sinister grin, glistening with a hunger that sent chills racing down my spine. "I see you," it growled, a voice deep and guttural, yet somehow carrying a melody that echoed through the trees. "You have stirred the darkness, and now it calls for you." I felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath my feet. The realization struck that this creature was a part of the shadows, a guardian, or perhaps a hunter sent to retrieve what had escaped. My instincts screamed for me to back away, to run, but my body betrayed me, frozen in sheer terror as the beast took a step forward. "You know my master awaits," it said with a wicked glee, The shadows hunger for your essence more than ever now. A thrushing noise engulfed the night, the sound of rushing shadows gathering, their whispers turning into shrieks that clawed at my sanity. I turned and ran, branches scratching at my arms like cold claws, my legs burning with exertion. I could hear the creature behind me, its growls reverberating through the dark, echoing the threat that I could not escape. Each twist and turn in the forest seemed to lead me deeper into despair. The shadows closing in, curling around trees, fangs snapping in the darkness. I stumbled over roots, the ground uneven and treacherous, but I pushed onward, spurred by the instinct to stay alive. Then I noticed the path had changed. The trees had twisted into unnatural formations, closing in as if the forest itself were alive, hungry for my fear, feeding on the panic coursing through me. Shadows draped upon the ground twisted around my feet, pulling, urging me to stop and give in. "Why do you resist?" the creature taunted behind me. "It is so much easier to surrender." In a moment of sheer desperation, I remembered the light from the altar, the power I had felt flowing through me. I had faced the darkness before. I could do it again. I reached for my locket, feeling for the comforting warmth within, gathering the memories that gave me strength. I needed to reclaim that power, to push back against the encroaching dark. As I stopped, the unearthly growl echoed around me, but I steadied myself. "You do not own me," I shouted defiantly, clutching the locket. I focused on its warmth, summoning that beacon of light, feeling the energy surge within my very core. With a roar, I flung my hand forward, channeling the light upward, streaming it toward the canopy above. The shadows bellowed in outrage, screeching at the audacity of defiance. The glow broke through the darkness, illuminating the forest like a second dawn, rays slicing through the oppressive gloom, sending the creatures scuttling back, screeching like wounded insects. But the beast was unfazed, more infuriated than ever. "You think this is enough? You think you can shine through it all?" It lunged at me, darting forward with unnatural speed, shadows dancing on its fur, claws glinting in the sudden light. I felt the very air cool, like ice washing over me as a wave of dread crashed in. I turned to run again, but the shadows were shifting within the trees, forming thick barriers, closing in faster than I could escape. There was no way out, and I could sense the darkness creeping back, every pulse of fear drawing it closer, feeding the chaos that hung heavy in the air. Suddenly, a strange noise split the air, a musical chime ringing out, clear and haunting. It resonated through me, startling the creature for a moment, halting its advance. I hesitated, feeling the sound tugging at my very being. The tone beautifully juxtaposed the terror surrounding me, and for a fleeting moment, I was transported somewhere far away, a serene place where shadows did not exist. But as fast as the calm washed over me, it faded. The creature snarled, snapping me back to harsh reality. "You think those foolish notes can save you?" The darkness thickened, creeping closer, encircling me like a predator. My mind raced. That sound, that beautiful sound, could be the key to disarming them, to reclaiming my strength. Gathering my breath, I closed my eyes, trying to silence the chaos around me. I focused on the chime, attempting to summon it from the depths of my mind. "Come on," I urged myself, reaching into the depths of my spirit, trying to transform my voice into the melody once more. "It has to work." And then I let it rise, allowing it to escape my lips as the notes flowed, soaring into the air. The forest responded. The trees shivered, as if the entire world held its breath. Shadows paused, uncertain. The creature momentarily distracted as the sound fluttered around it. Notes sharp and pure. "What are you doing?" it hissed, eyes narrowing, confusion blooming in its ghastly expression. The notes became clearer, filling the space between us, spinning a tapestry of light that shimmered and crackled, forcing back the encroaching shadows. I poured every ounce of my essence into the melody, hoping it would burst into life, a shield against horror. The creature's confidence faltered. It growled, prowling, but uncertainty flickered in those glowing eyes. "You think mere music can stand against the shadows?" It mocked, but the tone was strained, a hint of doubt cracking its facade. "I can shape the darkness," I replied, refusing to back down. I poured my soul into the melody, shaping it into something strong, something that could banish the dark, something that would resonate and break through the fear, pushing every shadow into retreat. The chime echoed through the trees, reverberating against the hard bark, awakening something deep within the forest. "Matter not, you will fall," the beast screamed, now flailing, its growls turning to desperate howls of frustration. With each note that rang out, I could almost feel a palpable shift in the very air around me, a fragile barrier emerging between us. All at once, I could see it, a swirl of light encasing me, pushing against the shadows, forcing them to retreat. The musical energy melded with the light, creating a shield that blanketed the dark. I could hear the shadows screeching, an anguished cacophony filling the air, piercing through the fortress of sound I had created. I could feel the creature stumble back, claws raking against the barrier, failing to penetrate the surreal force I invoked. In that moment of triumph, I opened my eyes to see the shadows collapsing, writhing helplessly as they tried to escape the shimmering light encasing me. But I knew it wasn't enough to simply hold them off. I had to break free, break the cycle. With a final surge of will, I belted out a high note, pure and uncompromising, sending shockwaves through the clearing. The forest responded, the very ground trembling under the intensity of my sound. A brilliant burst of light exploded from the center of the clearing, engulfing me and distorting the dark mass gathering. As the sound rumbled through the air, shadows shrieked and crackled, breaking apart like fragile glass. I felt the moment push against the air, pouring energy into the very essence of the shadows. Not just light, but a storm, a cleansing fire that would rid me of them forever. For just a fleeting moment, everything was silent, like the calm before a storm. Shadows and light collided, and I felt a rush of air as the beast lunged, its fangs snapping mere inches from the illumination, growling with pure fury. But it was too late. The energy surged, and the brilliant light exploded outward, illuminating everything in a blinding glow. I was aware of the creature howling in agony as the explosion ripped through it, shattering the remaining shadows. Tendrils of darkness disintegrated before me, twisting into vapor and vanishing like smoke in the breeze. And as the light faded, I found myself alone, surrounded by silence. The remnants of shadows scattered across the forest floor, dissipating in wisps like fading dreams, leaving only echoes of their rage. My heart raced as I stood there, breathless and trembling, realizing I had not just staved off the darkness. I had banished it, if only for now. But the victory wasn't without consequence. The clearing felt empty, the warmth lingering yet distant, a reminder of the balance I had just disrupted, a haunting reminder that the shadows could return. I knew better than to assume this was the end. I turned back toward the path, the weight of uncertainty heavy again in my heart. I pressed forward, ready to face whatever else awaited me, knowing I would have to confront the darkness within myself and outside once more. As I walked on, I could hear the whispers faintly echoing behind me, a promise, a threat, warning me that my journey was far from over. I knew better than to assume this was the end. As I pressed deeper into the darkness, a sense of foreboding wrapped around me tighter than the thorns that clutched at my clothing. Each step felt like a challenge against an unseen force, like the forest itself was awakening, whispering secrets that sizzled in the air around me. I felt an unsettling chill crawl up my spine, and I could have sworn I heard breaths coming from every direction, as if the trees were alive, watching my every move. The path I followed shifted, twisting in ways that felt unnatural, drawing me away from familiar terrain and deeper into uncertainty. The canopy overhead thickened, swallowing the pale moonlight, casting me into shadows that seemed to reach out, clawing for my senses. A sudden rustle in the tall grass made me freeze, icy dread flooding my veins. It wasn't just the sound, it was something about the silence that followed, thick and heavy like a blanket pressed down on me, suffocating, daunting. You think you've won? A voice, low and sinister, slithered through the darkness. It echoed around me, merging with the soft chirps of night creatures until it twisted into an unnerving symphony. I whirled around, taking in my surroundings, searching for the source, my heart racing like a drum in my chest. You can't hide from the shadows forever, it crooned, its tone sultry, yet filled with a wrath that sent shivers through my bones. No, this was no mere figment of my imagination. This foreboding presence had returned, looming just out of sight, a predator stalking its prey knowing that I was trapped. I felt a prickle race across my skin as a cold breeze swept through the forest, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decay. It was thick, almost tangible, like the remnants of something rotten lying unseen in the underbrush. I turned again, gripping my locket tightly, searching for anything to ground me. The darkness swirled restlessly, closing in without mercy. Out of the corner of my eye, shadows flickered. Beasts of the night skittered across my peripheral vision, but when I turned to confront them, nothing remained. The play of light and dark danced around me, conjuring visions of ghastly shapes I longed to forget. Dread curled in my stomach as the memory of the wolf-like creature surfaced. Its glowing eyes, its ravenous grin. I pushed the memory away, forcing it back into the recesses of my mind. Whispers grew louder, coiling around me like smoke, rising from the depths of the forest floor. "Stay with us," they beckoned, their voices sweet yet terrifying, promising safety within concealment. "We are all here, waiting for you." My pulse quickened. They knew me, understood my fears. The shadows played on them, eager to draw me into their nightmarish embrace. Then, I stumbled into a clearing, and my instinct screamed at me to run in the opposite direction. The moon shone down, illuminating a small stone well at the center, standing alone like a forgotten relic. Its surface glistened with dark, viscous liquid that pooled at its mouth. I could see ripples forming, as if something trapped within was restless to escape. "Look into it," the voice urged, now more playful, almost teasing. "You will find what you seek." I was mesmerized by the well, the surface swirling like a shadowy whirlpool, drawing me closer with an almost magnetic pull. The darkness within seemed to pulse, alive and insistent. I took a cautious step forward, heart thudding in my chest. Something deep inside warned me not to resist the lure. Yet a morbid curiosity pushed me to lean forward, looking into the abyss of the well. Images began to swirl within, a vivid tapestry of my fears interwoven with the shadows that lingered just beyond my reach. I saw faces, twisted and distorted, each one a ghost from my past, reaching out with desperate hands. Their eyes bore an emptiness that chilled me to the core, expressionless lips mouthing words I couldn't hear but felt rattling in the depths of my soul. "Join us," they cried silently, their voices merging into a haunting cacophony. I stepped back, nausea spiraling inside me as realization hit. These were the shadows of regrets that had followed me for years, lurking at the corners of my mind. I felt myself slipping, one foot drawn toward the well before I could catch myself. The whispering voices grew frantic, urging me toward the darkness, offering solace and surrender. "You will never be free," the creature growled again, the sound resonating through the clearing, vibrating in my bones. "Every choice brings the darkness closer. Every fear reflects your true self." I clenched my fists, fighting the pull of despair that threatened to swallow me alive. "I am more than my fears," I shouted, forcing the words through shallow breaths. "I am not afraid of you." The echo of my defiance hung heavy in the air, momentarily quieting the whispers, but I could feel the tension tremble around me, the shadows recoiling, preparing for an onslaught. Without warning, a sharp crack pierced the silence, the sound of branches snapping, followed by the shuffling of leaves. Something was moving through the trees, brushing just out of sight, low growls echoing into the air. A wave of revulsion washed over me as I understood that I was not alone. The creature prowling the darkness drew nearer, its presence manifesting in a palpable weight, an all-consuming dread that constricted my throat. Heart pounding, I turned, scanning the perimeter for any sign of escape. But the dense perimeter of trees felt like a prison, dark silhouettes looming closer as new shadows crept forward. The rustling grew louder, encircling me, a sinister symphony punctuating the threatening silence. "Why run?" The voice cooed from the darkness, layered with malice. "There is nowhere left for you to go." I gritted my teeth, fighting the instinct to scream, forcing myself to focus on the locket. It still pulsed with warmth, a flickering light in the approaching gloom. "You won't have me," I whispered, feeling the tremor in my voice betray the fear that clawed at my insides. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I pulled the light from within, letting it cascade into the surrounding shadows as I shouted, "I choose my own way." The shadows writhed, contorting and retracting from the brilliance expanding at my center. Claws emerged from the underbrush, glinting in the fading light, the creature silhouetted against the rising gloom. Its eyes glowed sharply, gleaming like twin moons in a nightmarish landscape. I could see its form more clearly now. Long, sinewy limbs, gnarled, twisted features marred by shadow, a grotesque semblance of a wolf, hunger etched into its expression. "This light won't save you," it howled, rage igniting the forest as it lunged forward, claws slicing through the air toward me. Time slowed, and for a moment I was paralyzed. Only my instinct allowed me to flinch, to step aside just as the claws grazed my arm. A deep searing pain erupting as though the night itself wanted a piece of my flesh. I staggered back, blood spilling from the wound, staining the ground in dark crimson, almost beautiful against the shades of gray surrounding me. The pain reminded me of my mortality, deepening the sense of urgency that surged within me. "You will pay for that," the creature snarled, rage twisting its already horrific visage, drawing power from my vulnerability. I clutched my arm, the light from the locket flickering in rhythm with my racing heart. Taking a shaky breath, I summoned every shred of strength, channeling the warmth and the hope I held onto fiercely. "No!" I shouted, forcing my voice to rise over the creature's howl. "You don't own me, and you never will." In an overwhelming surge, I drew all my fear and pain, feeding it into the light that now pulsed within my locket with an intensity that lit up my surroundings. Shadows recoiled, hissing in anger as the barrier began to swell around me, pushing back against the vile darkness. In that electrifying moment, I was not just defending myself. I was forging ahead, offering the light as weapon and shield both against the encroaching shadows. "Flee!" I bellowed, my voice echoing through the clearing with a force I had never imagined. "This world is mine." The creature faltered, caught in the light as tendrils of darkness swirled around it. I could see the ugly truth of what it was, an embodiment of pain, feeding on fear and anguish. It screamed, a howl of madness that resonated in the very soul of the forest, reverberating through the trees and leaving me momentarily breathless. From within the well, shadows began to pull away, retreating into the depths like a tide of despair drifting back into the abyss. I felt the surge of victory washing over me, intertwining with the festering pain at my side. The creature's cries became frantic as my light pushed even further, daring it to approach. But I knew better than to grow overconfident. This battle wasn't over, only escalating. As the beast snarled and growled, lunging again, I tightened my grip on the locket, readying myself for one final stand. The well behind me pulsed like a heart, a gaping maw that held secrets I didn't even want to fathom. And in a flicker of determination, I realized then that I was not just fighting for my life. I was battling for all those who had been silenced, those held captive by their own shadows. Sudden shadows coiled and writhed, morphing into a vortex, swirling with malevolent intent as if sensing my purpose, eager to reclaim that which I was determined to keep. You can't fight fate, the creature spat, its patience wearing thin. You are one with the darkness, like it or not. In that overwhelming moment, I felt the ancient ties binding me to the shadows. Each moment I had tried to forget, every dark memory rising to the surface. I refused to let them claim me again. I refused to let them claim me again. I gathered every ounce of light that remained, pushing it forward like a shield, spreading through the darkened clearing. The energy surged within me, wrapping around my body, a cascade of warmth fighting against the icy tendrils creeping through the shadows. Every terrible memory, every regret clung to me like rain-soaked cloth, dragging me down, but now I was fighting back. I stood tall, heart pounding as I faced the creature before me, its eyes aflame with fury and hunger. "You will regret this," it spat, the shadows snaking around its body, thickening into serpentine shapes that writhed like creatures alive, eager to tear me apart. But I wouldn't back down. Judgment loomed in those soulless eyes, and I realized this was my final stand, a reckoning not just for me, but for anyone lost in the cycle of darkness. I couldn't let fear control me any longer. The swirl of shadows darted toward me, their whispering voices merging into a cacophony of rage. They pulled and tugged, trying to drag me into the well, into the depths of despair I had glimpsed earlier. But I pushed back against their cold embrace, drawing forth the light inside me, letting it burst forth in a blinding wave that shattered the silence, scattering the oppressive darkness momentarily. My skin tingled and burned from the effort, but I felt alive, as if the very essence of existence surged through me. "No!" I shouted, as the light engulfed me, breaking against the layers of darkness that solidified around the creature. I felt it begin to falter, the menacing shadows recoiling from the radiant energy. With every breath, I breathed life into the light that rose around us, a pulse that echoed in the very core of the forest. The creature snarled, thrashing as tendrils of darkness wrapped tightly against it. But not even the shadows dared to touch the brilliance I summoned. Suddenly, the beast lunged at me again, claws extended as if to shred through the light I had created, its ferocity a visceral reminder of the horror trapped within the forest. I didn't flinch this time. I was no longer afraid. I reached for the pain that had shaped me, the losses I had suffered, transforming them into strength. The shadows howled, their cries piercing the air as I directed the light into a beam, aiming it straight at the heart of the creature. The moment the light made contact, a violent shattering exploded around us. The creature emitted an agonizing roar as the shadows writhed violently, struggling against the onslaught. In that savage embrace of light and dark, I saw every face of everyone the darkness had consumed, their anguish flaring briefly into existence. And I realized this wasn't just my struggle, it was theirs too. I felt their hope igniting within me, and it surged like a wildfire, consuming the darkness entirely. With a final deafening scream, the creature disintegrated, shards of shadow scattering into the night like ashes caught in a gust of wind. As the echoes of its howl faded, the once ominous forest transformed. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced with a heavy stillness, the air thick with the lingering scent of damp earth and familiar pine. The well behind me pulsed faintly before fading into darkness, no longer holding the chaos that had once seemed an eternity away. In the sudden quiet, I could finally breathe. My heart raced, but the chorus of whispers from the shadows had quieted, an eerie calm settling over the clearing. I glanced behind me to where the darkness once swelled, now merely shadows that danced harmlessly in the moonlight. Though fear still lingered, its grip loosened, twisting with relief, washing over me in waves. Slowly, I gathered my strength, knowing I had faced down the darkness and emerged transformed. I hadn't just fought for my own freedom. I had reclaimed a part of myself that had been lost in the constant shadow. With every step toward the path home, I could feel it echoing through the woods, that shivering source of light and energy mingling with the trees, creating harmony in a place once ruled by fear. As I left the clearing behind, bravado swept over me, a newfound sense of peace that had been forged through the tumult of my darkest nemesis. The chilling dread had been replaced by a soft whisper of hope, a reminder that the light, though diminutive, would always cut through the murk. I hadn't just fought for my own freedom. I had reclaimed a part of myself that had been lost in the constant shadow. With every step toward the path home, I could feel it echoing through the woods, that shivering source of light and energy mingling with the trees, creating harmony in a place once ruled by fear. As I left the clearing behind, bravado swept over me, a newfound sense of peace that had been forged through the tumult of my darkest nemesis. The chilling dread had been replaced by a soft whisper of hope, a reminder that the light, though diminutive, would always cut through the murk. Cider fusion, bringing clarity to the confusing shadows of my past. Each footfall on the forest floor felt like a declaration of my resilience, a promise to honor the journey that had led me here. The air was thick with the scent of earth and pine, a reminder of the life that thrived despite the darkness I had faced. As I moved deeper into the woods, memories washed over me, moments of struggle and solitude intertwined with flashes of joy and connection. I could sense the presence of my experiences, both haunting and liberating. They were threads in the tapestry of my existence, and I was finally ready to embrace them. I paused for a moment, closing my eyes as I listened to the gentle rustling of the leaves overhead. It was as if the forest itself celebrated my liberation, rejoicing in the harmony that had once seemed so elusive. Each sound felt like a melody, a promise that I was not alone, that my journey was woven into the greater story of life surrounding me. With this newfound strength, I reminded myself that healing is not linear. It ebbs and flows, sometimes retreating before surging forward again. But now, as I stood there in the fading light, I felt empowered. I had reclaimed that part of myself, and with it, a spark of courage flickered inside me. I was ready to face what lay ahead, to navigate whatever paths might unfold, carrying the light of my experience as both a shield and a guide. And so, I continued on, toward the horizon, eager to embrace the endless possibilities that awaited, knowing that no matter how dark the days might be, that fragile light within me would always be the beacon leading me home. As I continued on, each step grew heavier, and with it, an unsettling chill filled the air. The trees around me seemed to close in, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers reaching out, whispering secrets I couldn't quite decipher. I felt a prickling sensation along my spine, as if unseen eyes were watching me, judging me. I quickened my pace, but the shadowy figures lurking just beyond the tree line made it hard to shake the feeling of being pursued. I stumbled upon an old path, overgrown and almost forgotten. The gravel crunched beneath my feet, a sharp contrast to the soft sounds of the forest. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I wandered further down this forgotten trail. It wound deeper into the woods, the trees thickening until the light barely reached the ground. That same light that had once filled me with hope now felt like a fading memory, and I could see phantoms dancing at the periphery of my vision. Shadows swayed, grotesque and flickering like dying embers. Wait, was that a movement? I stopped, heart pounding in my chest. I turned, scanning the darkened thicket behind me. Nothing was there, just the relentless rustle of leaves. Only for a moment, when I shifted my gaze forward, I saw something glimmering just ahead. I approached cautiously, the chilling air gripping me like a vice. A rusted metal sign lay half buried in the dirt, its letters faded and barely legible. Warning: trespassers will face the consequences. I swallowed hard, unease creeping back into my thoughts, battling the courage I had claimed. Then came a sound that sent shivers cascading down my spine. A low, guttural growl emanated from the depths of the trees. It reverberated in my bones, making the hair on my arms stand up straight. My instinct screamed for me to run, but I stood frozen. The growl morphed into a tortured wail that echoed through the air, weaving itself into the fabric of the forest. My heart raced as the wail transformed into eerie laughter, high-pitched and echoing, devoid of warmth, a chorus of ghoulish mirth. It felt as if the very woods were alive, relishing my fear. Suddenly, I heard footsteps, soft and deliberate, creeping closer. I strained to listen, but the sound faded as quickly as it came. Each moment stretched out in the suffocating silence before an intense wave of darkness swept over me. I caught sight of movement in the shadows, dark shapes darting between trees, and I was certain I wasn't alone. Panic surged, and I turned to run, but the twisted branches seemed to shift, blocking my escape. They are alive, I thought, straining against an unseen grip tightening around me. As I stumbled back, the laughter grew louder, swirling around me like a tempest. My breath came in shallow gasps, the air thick with dread, and I could almost feel a presence behind me. I spun around, and there it was, a pale figure with hollow eyes, skin stretched tight over skeletal features, standing just a few feet away, as still as a statue. A grotesque smile twisted across its face, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. "You wanted to feel the light again," it hissed, voice dripping like ice. But here, the darkness is all-consuming. I turned to flee, adrenaline surging through my veins, but the path I thought I knew warped and twisted in strange directions. Every turn led me deeper into the nightmare, and the laughter faded into silence, replaced by a faint, disconcerting chorus of whispers. I strained to make out words, my own name rising and falling, always just out of reach. With every frantic stride, the forest morphed around me, and despair tightened its hold. I felt the pull of despair wrap around my chest, squeezing tighter as the shadows breathed. The trees leaned closer, their gnarled branches stretching forward like claws, as if eager to ensnare me in their embrace. Desperation surged. I couldn't let them win. I remembered the light. I thought of that spark within me, still flickering despite the overwhelming darkness. Instinct drove me to press on, urgency propelling me as I ignited a fiery determination to fight back. But would it be enough against the encroaching shadows lurking just beyond my reach? I pushed through the dense fog of panic creeping into my mind, focusing on the heartbeat thrumming wildly in my chest. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like icy chains, urging me to succumb to the dread I fought so hard to escape. But deep down, that spark of light flickered fiercely, reminding me that within the shadows, hope still existed. I had to find it. I had to find my way back to the light. As I stumbled deeper into the treacherous maze of trees, the darkness pulsed around me, alive with a sinister energy. Glimpses of movement raced across my vision, twisted shapes darting behind thick trunks, their laughter ringing like shattered glass in my ears. An overwhelming sense of despair clung to me like a second skin, making each breath a struggle. My legs burned, but I refused to stop. I could feel the shadows clawing at my back, urging me to look back, to surrender. That's when I stumbled into a clearing, finding myself face to face with a scene from a waking nightmare. The ground was littered with remnants of lost souls, worn-out shoes, frayed clothing, and scattered trinkets forgotten by time. In the center stood a dilapidated structure, a small cabin consumed by vines and darkness, its windows like hollow eyes staring back at me. The air thickened, the faint smell of decay wafting in from the cabin, mixing with the forest's musky scent. I hesitated, feeling a pull toward the cabin, drawn in by an unseen force. Each cautious step echoed in the stillness, an invitation to uncover the secrets buried within. As soon as I crossed the threshold, shadows danced along the faded walls, whispering tales of those who had come before me. The door creaked shut behind me, sealing me inside this macabre sanctuary. The darkness enveloped me, the whispers turning urgent. "You must join us," they hissed, a cacophony of desperate voices. I felt the chill of icy fingers brush against my skin, sending tremors of fear coursing through me. In that moment, I understood I was not just trapped by the trees, but by the haunting memories of my own past. The darkness had found a way to invade my mind, dragging my deepest fears into the light. With each breath, I felt the weight of regrets and sadness rising to the surface. I closed my eyes, fighting against the shadows that sought to consume me wholly. I recalled the warmth of sunlight on my skin, the laughter of friends that felt like a lifetime ago, and that spark of hope igniting within. Summoning every ounce of strength, I reached deep within my soul, grasping the light I had fought to reclaim. "I won't be yours," I declared, my voice breaking the suffocating silence. The shadows recoiled, hissing in rage, as the warmth of my defiance burned bright. I began to focus that light, visualizing it as a shield against the encroaching darkness. The cabin shook with primal fury, whispers rising to a fevered pitch. The dark figures surrounding me writhed in agony, their laughter twisting into howls of fury. With a fierce determination, I unleashed that light, a blinding blast cutting through the thick haze, forcing the shadows to retreat. The walls of the cabin trembled, splintering under the pressure as the shadows dissolved into nothingness, wisping away like smoke caught in a breeze. Light surged through the space, filling it with warmth, chasing away the lingering chill of despair. As the last of the darkness evaporated, I found myself standing alone in the clearing once more, the cabin reduced to mere echoes in the wind. The trees, once twisted and menacing, returned to their rightful form, casting dappled sunlight across the forest floor. I inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of my fear lift away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of freedom. I had faced my darkest fears and emerged victorious, the light within rekindled, illuminating the path ahead. With every step back toward home, I carried that light with me, a fierce reminder that I could reclaim my power and overcome even the deepest shadows. No longer a prisoner of fear, I moved forward, ready to face whatever awaited, enveloped in the knowledge that my journey was just beginning.